Welcome back to Paranormal M. Thanks for joining me for tonight's video. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. The first story tonight comes from someone who had a few strange experiences they still can't explain. It starts with two friends sitting on a back porch, playing music in a wooded area, when they suddenly hear a loud animal call that doesn't sound like anything familiar. After that, the stories only get stranger. So get comfortable, and I hope you all sleep well tonight. So I've got a few stories that still sit in the back of my mind, mostly because I've never been able to make sense of them. The first one happened when a friend and I were sitting out on the back porch at my parents' place. They live pretty far out, in a heavily wooded area, the kind of place where the trees feel like they're listening. We were just playing music together, nothing serious, just passing the evening. Then, about halfway through a song, we heard this sound come out of the woods. And I mean, it stopped us cold. It was incredibly loud, and it went on for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. The only way I can describe it is that it started like a wolf howling, then turned into something closer to a donkey braying, and then somehow ended like a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. We both just sat there, instruments in our laps, staring into the dark. Neither of us had any idea what we'd heard. Maybe it was a mountain lion. Maybe it was some animal call echoing weirdly through the trees. Or maybe it was something else entirely. I still don't know. The second one happened a couple summers later. Another friend and I were out sailing one evening on a lake. There was almost no wind, no other boats around, and everything was quiet. We weren't really going anywhere, just drifting and enjoying the stillness. Then, out of nowhere, the water around us started erupting with these violent wakes. Not just one wake either. It was all around us, maybe within 100 feet or so, like the lake had suddenly panicked. Then we saw something moving fast toward the boat. It made that V shape in the water, like when a fish swims just under the surface. Except, this thing looked huge. I'd guess close to 10 feet long. It came straight at us, then went underneath the boat. The whole boat rocked hard from side to side. It leaned so much that for a second I genuinely thought we might tip. We just sat there, trying to steady ourselves and figure out what had happened. Then, maybe a minute later, either the same thing or a smaller one came back around and did it again. This time it wasn't as dramatic, but it was still enough to make us both very aware that we were sitting in a tiny boat on top of a very mysterious lake. Later, a fisherman told me that the first explosion of wakes might have been schools of fish scattering because a predator was nearby. That explanation makes sense, but still, seeing something that big come right at us was not exactly comforting. The last one didn't happen directly to me, but I was there when the story was told, and I saw the photos myself. I used to work at a coffee shop, and after closing, people would sometimes hang around for a while. Some would smoke outside, some would have a beer, some would just drink coffee and talk. One night, this incredible mandolin player stayed after his set. He was also a former Special Forces guy, and he had this sharp, cheeky way of talking that made every conversation feel like it might turn strange at any second. He started asking uncomfortable questions, the kind of questions where you're not totally sure whether he's joking or testing you. So we all tried to keep things light, and eventually the conversation drifted toward ghosts and the paranormal. That's when he told us about something that had happened in his backyard. He said his dog had started losing its mind one evening, barking and spinning around in one spot like it was chasing something. He went outside, but he couldn't see anything there. Still, the dog kept snapping and circling, completely focused on the same patch of air. So he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. And in the photos, there were these two little points of light. They weren't huge, maybe about the size of golf balls. One was green, and the other was reddish-orange. He said he couldn't see them with his own eyes while it was happening, but once the photos were taken, there they were. We started scrolling through his camera roll, and in every picture, the lights were in different places. Sometimes they were close to the dog, sometimes off to the side, almost like they were teasing it. He must have taken 30 or 40 photos. Then, eventually, the lights disappeared, and the dog calmed down. I'm not saying I know what it was. I really don't. But I saw those pictures, and I've thought about them more than once since then. Some things just don't come with clean explanations. So this is one of those stories I still think about, and honestly, I'm not sure I'll ever have a neat little explanation for it. For a few years, I had all kinds of strange things happen in my house. Little noises, odd movements, things that didn't feel easy to brush off. Then it all sort of reached a peak and stopped. For about 3 years, everything was quiet again, normal, peaceful even. Then, a few years after my 2 older dogs passed away from old age, I brought home a new puppy. And not long after that, things started up again. One evening, I came home from work and got one of those Google Photos memories on my phone. It was a little collection of pictures of my old dogs. I let the puppy out, sat down on the couch, and started looking through it. And it hit me harder than I expected. I missed them. I missed their faces, their little routines, the way the house used to feel with them in it. After maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I put my phone down, got up, and made dinner. I tried not to sit in that sadness too long. Later that night, I was back on the couch watching TV. My puppy was curled up beside me, half asleep, when one of her toys suddenly rolled out from under the couch. Not slid, not nudged. Rolled. I just stared at it for a second. I remember thinking, how did that even happen? But I didn't want to make a big thing out of it, so I went back to watching my show. A couple hours later, my puppy was asleep on the floor, and I was still on the couch. That's when I heard a toy squeaking from my bedroom down the hall. And it wasn't just any squeak. It sounded exactly like this stuffed duck toy my older dog used to carry around everywhere. He loved that thing. I can still remember the sound of it. So I got up and checked the bedroom. I looked under the bed, behind the door, in the closet, everywhere I could think of. I couldn't find anything that would have made that noise. Eventually, I gave up and went back to the living room. By then, it was close to midnight. My puppy had moved to her bed at the end of the hallway, completely knocked out. I decided I was done for the night, so I turned off the TV. The living room went dark, but not pitch black. There was still a little bit of light from outside. I sat there for a minute, letting my eyes adjust before getting up. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of white light from behind the couch. I turned my head fast, trying to figure out what it was. And then I saw these tiny yellow lights floating over the end table at the far side of the couch. Maybe 3 or 4 of them. They hovered there for a few seconds, then kind of burst apart, almost like tiny sparks. That's when I really started feeling uneasy. Once my eyes adjusted more, I looked around the room. I could make out the lamp, the little box on the table, the edges of the furniture. Everything looked normal until I looked toward the wall behind the couch. I realized I couldn't see the window. At first, I thought it was just too dark in that corner. But then I started tracing the shape of the darkness with my eyes, and I realized it wasn't just darkness. It was shaped like a person. There was a shadow standing behind my couch, maybe 4 feet away from me. I froze. I sat there staring at it, trying to convince myself I wasn't really seeing what I thought I was seeing. My brain kept searching for some normal explanation, some trick of the light, some coat hanging somewhere, anything. but there wasn't anything there that should have looked like that. After a moment, I leaned forward, almost without thinking, and reached my hand out toward it. And right then, the shadow turned to its left, bent slightly, and ran down the stairs. I mean, ran. I jumped up, turned on every light I could reach, and searched the whole house. I checked the stairs, the rooms, the doors, the closets. Nothing was there. I just stood there afterward, completely shaken. The strangest part is that I never believed in shadow people. Years earlier, my ex had lived in that house with me, and she used to tell me she saw a dark figure moving around. She swore the place was haunted. I never really took it seriously, but after that night, I couldn't laugh it off anymore. I don't know what I saw. I don't know why it started again after my old dogs passed and the new puppy came into the house. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And I know that house felt like something had woken back up. I don't know every single detail of what my housemate was doing back then. I only know that when I first moved in, he made one thing very clear. I was not supposed to go into his room. Ever. And honestly, that was fine with me. Everybody needs their space. But later, I realized it was because he had all his ritual stuff in there. Candles, symbols, strange little objects. The whole atmosphere of a room that had rules even before you stepped inside it. I didn't ask too many questions, but he did tell me he knew about the thing in the house because apparently he had called it there on purpose. The problem was, whatever it was, it didn't stay in his room. It started hanging around in mine. At night, I'd feel it watching me from the wardrobe. Not just a weird feeling either. More like that heavy, focused pressure you get when someone is standing behind you and you know they're looking right at you. It would make noises when I was home alone. Little knocks, dragging sounds, that kind of thing. One night, I woke up with scratches on my arm that I couldn't explain. And then there was this one evening when my boyfriend was over. We were just sitting in my room, not doing anything unusual, and suddenly all the drawers in my dresser started opening and slamming shut. Over and over again. Like something was throwing a fit. It went on for a few minutes, and then it just stopped. I don't really know what to call it. Demon, spirit, entity, whatever word people feel comfortable using. I've never been too precious about the labels. I just know it was there, and it was annoying. The strange thing is, that wasn't even the worst thing I've ever dealt with. I know that sounds dramatic, but I'm honestly pretty used to this kind of thing. It doesn't scare me the way it might scare someone else. To me, it feels like part of the environment. Like walking down a path and seeing a fox near the trees. You notice it, you respect it. Maybe it's even fascinating, but it doesn't mean your whole world has to stop. I've moved since then, and the place I live now feels much quieter overall. Less active, I guess. But things still happen sometimes. A while back, I went into a small antique shop with a friend. We were just browsing, and I walked past this old framed mirror, and I immediately got that feeling. That very specific, something is here feeling. Then came the information all at once, the way it usually does for me. Not like I'm thinking it through, more like somebody drops a whole sealed envelope into my mind and I suddenly know what's inside. I leaned over and quietly told my friend what I was picking up from it. He got really nervous, but I didn't feel like it was dangerous. Attached, yes. A little heavy, yes. But not something we needed to panic over. That kind of thing happens automatically for me. Indoors, outdoors, around certain objects, even sometimes from videos or photographs. I don't go looking for it. It just shows up. One of the clearest experiences I ever had was at a friend's house during a party. I didn't know anything about the history of the place. I just remember walking in and immediately feeling like we were not welcome. The house had this tight, unfriendly feeling, especially near the back bedroom beside the fireplace. I kept sensing an older woman in there, and she was not happy about all these strangers being in her home. At the time, I thought she was alive. I genuinely thought there was an elderly woman staying in that room, hiding away from the party and silently hating every minute of it. The only part of the house that felt calm was the dining room. Everywhere else felt like we were trespassing. After I left, I told the host, "I'm sorry, but I felt really uncomfortable there. The old woman in the bedroom by the fireplace didn't want us in the house." He went pale. Then he told me an elderly woman had lived there before and had died in the house. That bedroom had been hers. And the dining room, the only place that felt peaceful to me, had actually been added years later. It wasn't part of the original house when she lived there. I'm not really someone who's obsessed with ghost stories or witchy stuff. I don't dress my life around it. I don't make it my whole personality. But for as long as I can remember, these experiences have just been part of my life. Quietly, casually, almost normally. And I know that may sound strange to other people, but to me, it's simply the way the world has always been. I want to tell you about something that happened near a small town where I grew up. And just so you know before I get into it, this is a heavy story. There's violence in it, and some of it is hard to sit with. This was back in the late 80s, in one of those quiet country areas where everybody knew everybody, or at least thought they did. There was a local guy around there, I'll call him Daryl, and people had two very different versions of him in their minds. When he was sober, he could come across as shy, soft-spoken, even harmless. But when he was drinking or using, it was like something dark took over. People were scared of him, and honestly, they had reason to be. There had already been trouble around him before. Affairs, threats, guns being pulled, trailers getting shot up, that kind of thing. He even lived with a relative of mine for a while, and from what I was told, he was awful when he was on something. Abusive, threatening, violent. She never went to the police, at least not that I know of, because she truly believed that if she did, he might come back and kill her. And that says a lot about the kind of fear he left behind. Then one day, he finally crossed a line nobody could come back from. The story goes that he was out driving the back roads with a buddy and a young woman. Just doing what a lot of young people did in small country towns back then. Driving around with nowhere particular to go. I don't know what everyone in that vehicle was doing, but Daryl was definitely not sober. There was a shotgun in the vehicle. At some point, he used it on his friend and killed him. Then he turned on the young woman and hurt her terribly. He thought she was dead, but somehow she survived. She lived, but with scars that would follow her for the rest of her life, both physically and mentally. After that, he ran. I was just a kid, but I still remember hearing adults talk about it. Police were out looking for him. Roads were blocked. People were nervous. It felt like this shadow had passed over the whole area. Eventually, they caught him, and he went to jail. And this is the part that still makes people angry. In prison, he apparently became a model inmate. Calm, polite, charming. People said he was good-looking, too. And when he was sober, he knew how to play that part. He convinced people he had changed. But he hadn't. Somehow, he ended up getting close to a female guard. And when he got out early, the two of them moved to a little town a couple of hours north of where I was from. For a while, maybe things looked normal from the outside. But then he started using again. And then he killed her. From what people said, what happened to her was not just murder. It was cruel. It was degrading. It was one of those things you hear and immediately wish you hadn't. A pointless, brutal tragedy that should never have been possible, because he never should have been free in the first place. He tried to run again, and police set up barricades. When he tried to get through one, they fired on him. He lost part of his thumb and part of his ear, but they took him alive. So back to jail he went, and I wish that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Years later, he was released again. Around that time, women in the city where he was living started disappearing. He was never charged for that. And I'm not saying I know for certain he was responsible, but people around there believed police were watching him. They were suspicious. They knew what kind of man he was. Eventually, he ended up living near our area again. Then one day, the rumor came around that he had killed himself in his car and that his dog was with him too. I heard different versions of how it happened. One version said he left a note. Another said he called his mother first. But the message was basically the same. He said he couldn't live with the ghosts anymore. Whether he meant that literally, or whether he meant the memories of what he had done, I don't know. Maybe both. Maybe when you leave that much pain behind you, the past stops being the past. I know I probably don't have every single detail perfect. Stories like this get passed around in pieces, and time changes the edges. But the heart of it is true. This really happened. And even now, when I think about it, what stays with me most is how many lives were destroyed before anyone finally accepted what he was. I'm telling you, this is one of those stories I still don't know what to do with. It was around midnight in 1976, out on the back roads of rural Missouri, the kind of road where the darkness feels almost physical. We were probably 30 miles from anything you'd call a town, just four of us, riding along, talking, laughing, doing what young people do when the night still feels endless. And then, we saw him. There, sitting on a guardrail like he'd been placed there, was a man dressed like he had stepped straight out of an old gangster movie. Pinstripe suit, brimmed hat pulled low, shiny shoes, the whole thing. He had one leg crossed, elbow on his knee, chin resting in his hand, posed almost like that old statue, the thinker. But he wasn't looking at us. He wasn't looking at anything really, just staring straight across the road, blank as a wall. Our headlights hit him, the car passed by, and he never moved. Not a blink, not a turn of the head. Nothing. If I had been alone, I'd have told myself I imagined it. But there were four of us in that car, and every single one of us saw him. The strange part is, that wasn't even the first thing that happened that night. Maybe 30 minutes earlier, we came around a curve and saw a group of kids standing right in the middle of the highway. There were about 8 of them, high school age, all wearing gym clothes. Shorts and t-shirts, like the kind you'd wear for school sports. The reversible shirts where one team wears one side and the other team flips theirs inside out. They were walking toward us, slow and steady, right down the road. Not on the shoulder, not near the edge, right in the lane. We had to stop the car because we were going to hit them. And when the headlights landed on them, they just kept coming. No panic, no laughing, no reaction at all. We got out and yelled at them. I mean, we really let them have it. Told them they were idiots. Told them they were going to get themselves killed. Told them they could cause a wreck out there in the dark. They didn't answer. They didn't even seem to hear us. They just kept walking, slow and empty-eyed, like they were moving through a dream none of us were invited into. So So we got back in the car, and being young and dumb ourselves, we decided to scare them a little. We drove toward them, expecting them to scatter at the last second. They didn't. They didn't flinch. We had to swerve around them onto the shoulder to keep from hitting them. I remember turning around and looking out the back window, and all four of us were saying the same thing, just in different versions. What in the world was that? We couldn't leave it alone. We drove down to the bottom of the hill, crossed over, and went back to see if we had really seen what we thought we'd seen. And there they were again. Only now they had crossed the grassy median, which was knee-high and probably crawling with chiggers, and they were walking in the eastbound lanes. Same slow pace, same blank faces, same complete lack of concern that cars existed. We stopped again. We yelled again. We accused them of being drugged out or pulling some kind of prank. Nothing. They just kept coming. So we drove toward them again, and again they didn't move. We had to go around them just like before. At that point, the fun had drained out of it. It wasn't funny anymore. It was just wrong. We drove to the nearest payphone and called the police. Honestly, part of us still thought maybe we'd get to watch these kids get hauled off for playing some dangerous stunt in the road. But when we drove back to where they had been, they were gone. Completely gone. No kids in the road. No movement in the fields. No flashlights. No cars parked nearby. Nothing. Just that same empty Missouri highway sitting there like it hadn't shown us a thing. And then, later that night, we saw the man on the guardrail in the gangster clothes. I know how this sounds. I really do. But there were four of us, and we still talk about that night all these years later. Nobody has ever come up with an explanation that feels right. The night ended in a very earthly way, though. After I dropped everybody off, I stopped at the local car wash where we used to hang around. A patrol car pulled in, like they always did, usually just to run us off. Only this time, they searched my car, found a little weed, and hauled my skinny self off to jail for the night. So there it is, a road full of silent kids, a man dressed from another decade sitting in the dark, and me ending the night behind bars. I've had plenty of strange nights in my life, but that one still sits by itself. So this wasn't the house I grew up in, but it's the one I still think about when people ask if I've ever lived somewhere that felt truly wrong. Back when I was in college, my boyfriend at the time and I rented this tiny old mill house. It had been built sometime in the early 1930s, I think, and it sat in this worn-down little neighborhood tucked between a limestone quarry and an old cemetery. And honestly, the house was already in terrible shape before anything strange ever happened. The landlord barely fixed anything. The floors dipped, the walls cracked. The whole place felt like it was being held together by habit. Every few days, the quarry would blast something, and the whole house would shake like a train had hit the foundation. The windows would rattle, the dishes would clink, and I used to wonder, half joking and half not, whether the cemetery on the other side of the road was getting shaken up too. The neighborhood didn't help. Some of the neighbors treated the cemetery like a shortcut or an empty field. Their kids would ride four-wheelers right over the graves. There were always police cars somewhere nearby, usually for domestic calls, and there were people wandering around at all hours who made you lock the door twice. While we lived there, a man was killed just a street over. Another neighbor had a record for watching women through windows. So, the atmosphere was already heavy. But inside that house, it was something else. I always felt a male presence there. Not curious, not sad, just angry, like he wanted us gone. During the day, my boyfriend and I would hear heavy footsteps moving through rooms that were completely empty. Not little creaks, Boots. Slow, deliberate boots crossing the floor or coming down the hallway toward whatever room we were sitting in. He worked long shifts, and sometimes he worked nights, so I was alone there a lot. And when he wasn't home, I would sometimes hear this low, ugly grunting sound. At first, I thought it was my dog, Maisie, making some weird noise in her sleep. But then I realized it wasn't coming from her at all. And whatever was in that house seemed to enjoy upsetting her. Maisie was usually a calm dog, sweet, sleepy, not dramatic. But in that house, she would growl at dark corners. She would stare into empty rooms, like someone was standing there. One night, I was sitting in bed with her, asleep right in front of me. The room was quiet. And then I heard that grunting sound again. Right after that, I watched the fur on her side move, like someone had jabbed her with two invisible fingers. She startled awake and looked straight at me, confused and hurt, like she thought I had done it. I still hate thinking about that. But the worst night happened when my boyfriend was actually home. I woke up in the middle of the night because Maisie was standing over me on the bed. Her legs were braced, her hackles were up, and she was snarling. Not barking yet, just this deep, warning growl. At first, I thought maybe there was an animal outside. A raccoon, a stray dog, something like that. Then I sat up and looked toward the bedroom doorway. There was a man standing there. He was tall, or at least he looked tall in the dark, and he was standing in this stiff, bent forward way, like he was about to rush into the room. His arms were raised slightly, like he was bracing himself. Because of the neighborhood, my first thought was, someone broke in. I started shaking my boyfriend as hard as I could, whispering and panicking, telling him to wake up. Maisie started barking then, loud and furious, still standing between me and the doorway. And while my boyfriend was waking up, the man lowered his arms. Then he turned and walked silently into the bathroom across the hall. There was no window in that bathroom big enough to leave through, no back door, no closet, no second exit, and he could not have walked back out without us seeing him. But when we checked, nobody was there. No intruder, no open door, no sign of anyone in the house at all. We stayed until the lease ended because we didn't have the money to leave sooner. But the second we moved out, everything stopped. That was about 10 years ago now, and I've lived in several places since then. Maisie never growled at empty corners again. She never stared into dark rooms like that again. Whatever was in that house stayed there, and I'm very grateful it did. I grew up in a house in northern Alabama that, to this day, I still believe was haunted. And the strange thing is, we only had one real neighbor nearby, and their house had things happening in it too. Neither of us knew what the other family was dealing with until one day, very carefully, we finally asked. I was around 14 or 15 when this happened. I was being homeschooled then because I'd had a rough time with bullying at my old school, and for PE, I would usually jog back and forth through our living room while playing music as loud as I could get away with. We called that room the den. It had been added onto the house years after the original build, maybe sometime in the 80s or 90s, and the whole inside of it was wood. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, even the stairs that led up to my sister Marin's room. Everything was wood, so sound carried in there in a very particular way. That day was actually beautiful. Bright, calm, the kind of day where you'd think nothing bad could possibly happen. I remember considering going outside to do my jogging instead, but I couldn't find my little music player, and I needed music. I have asthma, and running without something to focus on makes me way too aware of every breath, every wheeze, every little moment where my lungs start acting like they're filing a complaint. so I stayed inside. My sister and I were the only ones home. Everybody else was either at work or school. I started my usual routine in the den, jogging back and forth with music playing, and after a little while, I thought I heard someone call my name from the kitchen. At first, I ignored it. Then I heard it again. The kitchen was close to the den, so it wasn't like the sound was far away. It felt nearby, personal. I paused the music and stood there listening, trying to be reasonable about it. I don't like jumping straight to ghosts when there could be some normal explanation. Maybe it was a noise from the house. Maybe my mind was filling in blanks. But then I got that feeling. You know the feeling when the air in a room seems to change, and your body notices before your mind does? It felt like I was being watched. The room didn't feel empty anymore. I tried to shake it off and keep going. About halfway through my exercise, Marin came down the wooden stairs dressed like she was heading out. I remember looking at her, confused, because I hadn't expected her to leave. She sighed and told me she'd been called into work for a few hours. She reminded me to finish any schoolwork I still had left. I told her I would, even though I had already finished everything for the week. I hadn't slept much the night before, so I'd stayed up and done the rest of it. I walked her to the front door so I could lock it behind her. My music was still playing back in the den while she made a few tired little jokes about not wanting to go to work. Then I stood on the porch and watched her drive away. After she was gone, I went back inside, locked the door, and headed toward the den. And that's when I saw her. There was a little girl standing behind one of the couches. She looked maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was pale, wearing a white nightgown, with long hair hanging around her face. But her face itself was strange, blurred somehow. Not missing exactly, but not clear either. The part that still bothers me is that she didn't look see-through. She looked solid, but wrong. Like my eyes understood she was there, but my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. For a second, everything in me just stopped. My heart, my thoughts, even the room seemed to freeze. Then she dropped. I heard her hit the floor, a real heavy thud against the wood. And then she crawled, fast, from behind one couch to behind the couch beside it. That broke me. I squeezed my eyes shut and yelled, "Go away!" Then I ran downstairs to my parents' bedroom because they had a door that led outside, and if I needed to get out of the house quickly, that was the safest place to be. I was crying when I called my mom. She tried to calm me down, and she prayed with me over the phone. I stayed in that bedroom for a while, but I could hear movement upstairs. Footsteps. Things being shifted around. It sounded like someone was walking through the rooms above me, touching things, moving things. Eventually, I couldn't stay inside anymore. I went out into the yard and waited there until my sisters got home from school. I don't tell this story very often because I know how it sounds. It sounds impossible. It sounds like something from a horror movie, and I understand why some people wouldn't believe it. But I know what I saw. And even after all these years, I still remember every detail. The wood in that room, the music still playing, the way she dropped to the floor, the sound of it. Out of everything that happened in that house, that was one of the experiences that stayed with me the most. I grew up in an old house in the Midwest, one of those places that felt like it had been standing there forever. It was built sometime in the late 1870s, and even when I was little, it had that heavy, settled feeling, like the walls were quietly remembering things. My mother was actually the first one who saw something. I was about 2 years old then. It was winter, and she was pregnant with my younger brother, so instead of sleeping in the bedroom, she had been sleeping on the couch because it was easier on her back. We heated the house with a wood stove, and that night it was burning in the room with her. She told me later that she woke up because she heard what sounded like a single footstep. When she opened her eyes, she saw a small shape moving across the room. It was less than 3 feet tall, just a little shadowy figure. At first, she thought it was my sister wandering around half asleep, so she told her to go back to bed. But the figure didn't go back. It moved closer to the stove. My mother told it again, a little firmer this time, to go back to bed. And again, it moved closer, until it looked like it was standing right against the stove itself. That scared her, because if it really was my sister, she could have been badly burned. So my mother reached over and turned on the lamp beside the couch. The moment the light came on, the figure dropped down and vanished underneath the stove. She was shaken enough that she got up and went back to the bedroom. And that was only the beginning. As we got older, my brother, my sisters, and I all heard things in that house. Footsteps in the hallway when nobody was there. Whispering voices from rooms that should have been empty. You could never make out the words, but you knew it was whispering. It had that shape to it. When I was a teenager, I had Boy Scout meetings in the evenings. My scoutmaster would pick me up, and while I was gone, the rest of my family would usually be at my sister's softball games. That meant I sometimes came home to an empty house, and I hated it. Every time I was alone there at night, I would hear music coming from the basement. But the basement wasn't really a basement. It was more like a muddy crawl space under the house with one bare light bulb hanging down there. Then I would hear a voice calling me. I couldn't tell if it was a man's voice or a woman's voice. It was just there, coming up from beneath the floor, saying my name. After that happened a few times, I stopped waiting inside. I would sit outside on the steps until someone else got home. I never told my family about it. Not then. I thought they would laugh, or worse, believe me. When I turned 18, I joined the Army Reserve. One night, I had to be up for a 4 a.m. formation, and the Reserve Center was about 90 minutes away. I went to bed around 11, trying hard to get some sleep. Just as I was drifting off, I heard knocking at the foot of my bed. At first, I thought I had imagined it. I opened my eyes, looked around, and saw nothing. So I closed my eyes again and told myself it was just the ghost, which was what my siblings and I had started calling it by then. Less than a minute later, the knocking came again. Louder. I opened my eyes. Nothing. I said out loud, "Please leave me alone. I have to sleep." Then I closed my eyes again. The knocking started immediately. This time I snapped and said, "Stop it!" But it kept happening. Again and again, always at the foot of the bed. I would open my eyes, see nothing, close them, and the knocking would come back. Finally, I lost my temper and said, "Just stop it." That was when the sound changed. Suddenly, on both sides of my headboard, just inches from me, the knocking exploded into this fast, furious pounding. Right beside my head. I didn't stay to figure it out. I jumped out of bed, ran downstairs, got dressed, and drove to the Reserve Center. I slept in my car for maybe an hour before formation. That was a long night. Years later, after both of my parents had passed away, my older sister and I were cleaning out the house. Somehow, the ghost came up in conversation, and I finally told her about the music from the basement and the voice calling my name. I had never told anyone before. She went pale. I mean, the color just left her face. Then she said, "I heard the exact same thing. Music from the basement, and something down there calling my name. I never told anybody because I thought they'd think I was crazy." That stayed with me. I still don't know what was in that house. I don't know if it was one thing or several things. I only know I'm grateful I don't live there anymore. But that wasn't the last strange house I lived in. When my wife and I were first married, we rented an old farmhouse beside 2 ponds. It was a beautiful property, quiet, open, peaceful looking. The landlord told us it had been her family home, and she also told us that her mother had died there. She had cancer, and one day she walked out to one of the ponds and drowned herself. We didn't know what to say to that, and honestly, we didn't think too much about it at first. At the time, I was working third shift in law enforcement, and my wife worked as a 911 dispatcher. She usually got home around 10 at night. One evening, she was upstairs in the office on the computer. The office was a narrow little room, maybe 8 feet wide and 10 feet long. One wall had closet doors, and behind them was a shared shelving space that connected with the guest room on the other side. Around 11:30, I got a frantic phone call from her. She was terrified. It took a while before she could even explain what had happened. She said all the closet doors had started opening and slamming shut by themselves. Not once, not gently, violently, over and over. She ran out of the house, got into the car, and called me from there. She spent the rest of the night at her sister's place nearby. Another time, her brother came by while we weren't home. He knocked, waited, and no one answered. As he was walking back to his car, he looked up at a second-floor window and saw a woman standing there. Then she moved quickly out of sight. He went back and knocked again. Nobody answered. A few minutes later, we pulled into the driveway, and he told us what he had seen. That window was right at the top of the landing near my office. After that, I started thinking about all the nights I had sat in that office playing video games and feeling like someone was watching me. Not imagining it, not just being nervous. Watched. Even our cats hated the second floor. They would stop at the bottom of the stairs, stare upward, hiss, and growl at something we couldn't see. We don't live in that farmhouse anymore either, but every now and then we still drive past it. And whenever we do, the stories come back. The closet doors, the woman in the window, the feeling on the stairs. Some houses just don't let you forget them. You know, I wouldn't really call it a haunted house. Not exactly. It was more like something passed through our home for about a week, made itself very known, and then just left. At the time, I was a teenager living with my parents in this old brick row home in a historic part of Baltimore. And if you've never been inside a row home, they're usually long and narrow. In ours, you could stand near the front door and see almost straight through to the back door. When you walked in, there were 2 living room spaces, then a little hallway with the bathroom on one side and a closet on the other. After that were the stairs going up, and across from them was the laundry area with those folding closet doors. Then came the dining room, and finally the kitchen, where the back door was. That layout matters, because one night I was downstairs in the living room with my dog Macy. My dad was out with friends, my mom was upstairs asleep, and the house was quiet. Macy needed to go outside, so I let her out through the back door. When I let her back in and turned around to head toward the living room, I saw what looked like a person walk into the front room. Because of the way the house was shaped, I could only see someone if they crossed directly through that narrow line of sight. So at first I thought, okay, my dad must be home. I probably just didn't hear the front door because the back door was loud when I closed it. But then, Macy stopped near the dining room table. She froze. Her tail tucked under her, the hair on her back standing straight up, and she started growling in this low, frightened way I had never heard from her before. Not once before that night, and not once after. That was when I realized something was wrong. I didn't hear my dad. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear the front door. So I started walking toward the living room, trying to convince myself I had just seen a shadow, or maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But right as I passed the laundry room, something slammed into the inside of those folding doors so hard that the doors actually jumped at the hinges. I ran. I mean, I screamed and ran like my body had made the decision before my brain caught up. My mom came flying down the stairs because she had heard the bang first, then me screaming. We opened the laundry room together, expecting something to have fallen over. But nothing had moved. Nothing was on the floor. There was no reason for that sound. The next day, my mom and I were in the kitchen making dinner, trying to act normal. She had music playing from her tablet, just streaming through Pandora, and suddenly, it started crackling with static. Not buffering. Not cutting out. Static, like an old AM radio. We both looked at it because that made no sense. Then we heard a small thump from the hallway. When we turned, this basket of my dad's sandals, which he always kept at the bottom of the stairs, lifted or slid or somehow shot forward about 1.5 feet. Then it landed perfectly upside down. And the strange part was that every single sandal was still inside. It looked like someone had put a lid over the basket, flipped it over neatly, and pulled the lid away. That was the moment we stopped trying to explain it away. We knew something weird was happening. For the rest of that week, we all heard it. My mom, my dad, me, and even my best friend Marin, who stayed one night because she wanted to hear it for herself. It sounded like someone running up and down the stairs. From the first floor to the second, then up toward the third floor, which we used like an attic. Heavy, fast footsteps. Back and forth. Over and over. My dad had started sleeping downstairs because of his COPD, and because the bathroom was on the first floor, so he heard it clearly too. My room and my mom's room were upstairs, connected by a shared wall, and her closet sat right under the attic stairs. So at night, it felt like the sound was moving all around us. Then the dreams started. I don't remember what my parents dreamed about, but mine were always the same kind of feeling. I'd be lying in bed with my door open, looking into the hallway, and there would be a woman standing there. She had long auburn red hair, and she never said anything. She just stood there. By the end of the week, as strange as it sounds, we started getting used to it. Not comfortable exactly, but tired, annoyed, sleep-deprived, and maybe a little braver because Marin was there that night. So when the running started again, I finally sat up and yelled, "Can you please stop? We're trying to sleep." And it stopped. Well, almost. First, it did one last loud run up the stairs, like a teenager stomping away after being told no. It honestly sounded annoyed. Then everything went quiet. That happened for 2 or 3 more nights. The footsteps would start, one of us would tell it to stop, and it would do that same dramatic final stomp before going silent. And then, just like that, it was over. No more footsteps. No more dreams. No more baskets flipping over or doors getting hit from the inside. Whatever it was, it felt like it had only been passing through. It stayed for a week, made sure we knew it was there, and then moved on. You know, one of the houses I lived in when I was growing up had strange things happen so often that, after a while, we almost started treating it like part of the routine. I do not mean little creaks in the walls or pipes knocking at night. I mean furniture moving right in front of us. A kitchen chair would slide back from the table, slow and deliberate, like someone invisible was pulling it out to sit down. One night, I was downstairs watching TV when I heard this awful dragging sound coming from the bedroom above me. It was heavy, like someone was hauling a solid wooden dresser across the floor. When I went upstairs to check, 2 drawers were pulled open. Both cabinet doors were wide open, and the whole thing had shifted across the room. Not far, maybe 8 or 9 feet, but it was so heavy that it took 3 of us to shove it back where it belonged. There were 2 times, though, that really stayed with me. The first was on a Sunday morning. I was just waking up, Still in that foggy place between dreaming and being fully awake, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. The hallway and my room both had this old linoleum flooring, so every step had that dull, sticky sound to it. The footsteps came right into my room, stopped beside my bed, and then I felt the mattress dip, like someone had sat down next to me. That snapped me awake. Now, I know people can imagine things in that half-awake state. I would have brushed it off completely, honestly. But when I looked, there was still a visible dent in the memory foam topper, shaped like someone had just been sitting there. It stayed for a few seconds before slowly rising back up. The second time happened a few months later in my brother's room. I had been out with some friends that evening, nothing wild, just a few drinks, and I came home thinking my brother was staying out for the night. My room was freezing, so I decided to sleep in his instead. I had just climbed into bed and was doing that little shuffle where you try to get the sheets and blanket wrapped perfectly around your feet. Then I felt the mattress move beside me. Clear as anything, someone lay down next to me. A second later, I felt an arm reach over my waist. At first, I thought my brother had come home after all and was just being annoying, trying to wind me up. So I rolled backward with my elbow, aiming for his ribs, ready to tell him to knock it off. But there was nobody there. Nothing. Just empty space. I was definitely shaken, but somehow I still managed to fall asleep eventually. I think when you live in a house like that long enough, your brain starts filing impossible things under "deal with it tomorrow." There were other moments too. Voices calling our names from empty rooms. I remember hearing my mom call me from the kitchen once, even though she was still out shopping. Another time, my friend and I were sitting in the lounge when we heard my brother call out from upstairs. But he was sitting right behind us at the dining table. All three of us heard it. We just looked at each other, waiting for someone else to be brave enough to go check. Naturally, I ended up being the one who had to go. The strange thing is, none of it ever felt evil. It was not dark or threatening. It was just unsettling, like the house had its own habits and occasionally forgot we were there. Spooky, yes. Strange, absolutely. But never cruel. Just after my wife and I moved into that old 2-story house, we started getting the feeling that we were not exactly living there alone. The first thing that really stayed with me happened late one night after work. It must have been around 10:30 or maybe 11. I was in the tub trying to unwind, and my wife was sitting in the bathroom talking with me. Nothing strange was happening. It was just a normal, quiet night. Then, I heard children singing downstairs. Not one child. A group of them. Soft voices, like they were gathered in the living room singing "Happy Birthday." At first, I thought I was just tired. I sat there for a second, listening, trying to make sense of it. Then I asked my wife, "Do you hear that?" She went still and said, "Yes, kids singing Happy Birthday." The singing slowly faded out, like somebody had turned the sound down from another room. We just looked at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. After that night, my wife really did not like being alone in the house. It was a wooden 2-story place with 2 bedrooms upstairs. My wife and I slept in one room, and our little girl's crib was in the other. More than once, we heard our toddler talking in her room. At first, we did not think much of it. Kids talk to themselves. That is normal. One day I smiled and asked her, "Who are you talking to?" She pointed right over my shoulder and said, "Johan, he's over there." That answer chilled me more than I wanted to admit. She kept talking to Johan the whole time we lived in that house. Some things started small. Something we needed would disappear, then later show up in a place where we absolutely would have seen it. This was back when people rented movies, and you needed a membership card. One evening, we wanted to rent something, but we could not find the card anywhere. We searched drawers, counters, pockets, the car, everything. After a long while, we gave up and went to the video store anyway. When we came home, the card was lying right in the middle of our bedroom floor. Not under anything, not tucked beside the bed, just sitting there in plain sight. There were other things too. At the top of the stairs, there was a window. My wife would sometimes carry laundry upstairs quietly, and more than once, when she turned the corner at the bottom of the steps, she saw a dark figure standing at the top, facing that window. Just standing there, looking out. Then one night, I saw it myself. We lived in a town with a volunteer fire department, and whenever there was a call, the siren would sound through town. One night, that siren woke me up. I rolled over, half asleep, trying to settle back down. Then I looked toward my wife's side of the bed. There was a black figure standing beside her, facing the direction of the siren. I pushed myself up, thinking somebody had broken into the house. The figure turned its head toward me, and then it was gone. Not walked away, not ducked down. Gone. The last thing I will tell you is what finally made me act. We are Catholic, and we had holy water from Rome that someone had given us. One day I decided I was going to bless the house myself. I opened the windows and started in the attic, because during the day, that was where the house felt the heaviest. I made a cross on each wall with the holy water and said a blessing. Then I worked my way through the second floor. I got about halfway down the stairs, made another cross, said another blessing, and then my phone rang. I answered it. After that, I got distracted and forgot to finish the rest of the house. The next day, I was at work. My wife was home with our baby daughter, who was moving around in her walker. At some point, my wife heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not creaking, footsteps, stomping. And they stopped right where I had stopped making the crosses. She tried to brush it off, but then the stomping came again, heavier that time. Heavy enough that the cat looked toward the stairs. The baby looked too. That evening, I came home and finished the blessings all the way through the house. I know some people will think I am making this up, but I am not. I do not know what was in that house. I only know what we heard, what we saw, and how it felt living there. I'll tell you something that happened to me years ago in western Montana, and honestly, I still don't have a clean little explanation for it. At the time, I had a parrot named Pico, and he was completely attached to me. Sweet bird, loud as a fire alarm when he wanted to be, and absolutely not interested in bonding with anyone else. My husband at the time, who is now my ex, was trying to plan an overnight trip so we could visit one of those sapphire digging places out there. But of course we had to find somewhere that would let us bring Pico. He called around for a while and finally found a place that rented little cabins. They told him they normally didn't allow pets, but they had this larger cabin full of bunk beds that mostly sat empty unless a school group came through. They said if we didn't mind staying in that one, we could bring the bird. So that's what we did. The cabin itself was unusual, but not in a bad way. It was raised up over this deep little ravine, sitting on tall wooden supports, with a long, narrow walkway leading to the front door. There was a pretty good drop off the side of that walkway, easily 6 feet or more. Out back, there were stairs that led down toward the outdoor bathroom. Nothing about it felt creepy when we arrived. Not one bit. And back then, I didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that. I had studied science, my family was full of science-minded people, and I was very much in the there is always a reasonable explanation camp. I got Pico settled in, and we spent the day at the sapphire mine. It was actually a lovely day. We came back close to sunset, tired and dusty, and I spent a little time with Pico before getting ready for bed. When it was time to sleep, I covered his cage with a big sheet like I always did. My husband wasn't tired yet, so he picked a bunk near the front door where he could read without keeping me awake. I took a bed closer to the back of the cabin, near Pico. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of boots. That's the only way I can describe it. Heavy shoes, walking quickly back and forth across the cabin floor. At first, I thought it was my husband pacing around, and I remember feeling irritated because I was half asleep and needed to use the bathroom. But when I sat up, the moon was so bright I could see across the cabin clearly. My husband was asleep in the bed by the front door. I looked around, and there was no one else inside. But the footsteps were still going. Back and forth, from one end of the cabin to the other. And then came the part that made my blood go cold. Every time those footsteps got near Pico's cage, he would start making his soft little cooing sounds. That was exactly what he did when his cage was covered and he could hear someone nearby. So I knew I wasn't just imagining a noise. Pico heard it too. I sat there frozen, trying to make my brain turn it into something normal. The building settling, an animal underneath, wind, anything. But it sounded like someone walking inside the cabin in heavy boots. I was too scared to cross the room and wake my husband, and there was absolutely no chance I was going outside alone to that bathroom. So I got back under the blankets, pulled a pillow over my head, and tried not to listen. Somehow, after a while, I fell back asleep. By morning, I had almost talked myself into believing it was a nightmare. One of those vivid, strange dreams that follows you around after you wake up. Then my husband opened his eyes and said, "Did you hear anything weird last night?" And that was when my stomach dropped. He told me that after I fell asleep, while he was still reading, he heard someone walking up and down the wooden walkway outside the cabin. Not inside, outside, right along the front. He grabbed a knife and went to the door. When the footsteps came right up to it again, he threw the door open. No one was there. And because of the drop from that walkway, there was nowhere for anyone to hide. No quick way to jump down and disappear. No bushes right beside it. Nothing. Then I told him what I had heard after he fell asleep. The footsteps inside. The pacing. Pico cooing whenever they came close to him. We didn't try to make breakfast. We didn't stay for the rest of the morning. We packed everything up and left early. Before that night, neither of us believed in anything paranormal. Not really. After that cabin, I couldn't say that anymore. I want to tell you what happened, because it has honestly stayed with me. Twice in the same morning, I felt that strange, sitting ghost feeling again. I was half asleep, and then I heard this disgusted sound from a man, almost like a sharp, huh. It was clear enough that it startled me. Before I fully woke up, I saw what looked like a goat outside. Then, right in front of me, it changed into a white man sitting there, just looking straight at me. In the dream, or whatever it was, I grabbed my phone and tried to take a picture of him. The second I tried, I woke up. The night before, I had not been acting like myself. I had been drinking, and I was meaner than I should have been. Then I went to work the next day, and people felt cold toward me. Around that same time, I found out something terrible had happened in my town, that people had been murdered by a son. It all hit me at once, and I broke down. I really do feel like I learned something from that day. There was also this case about a boy named Peter Keene, and I believe I saw his spirit in my house once. When the energy around me was positive, I heard this little happy sound, like, "Yay, yay." I asked my parents if they ever hear or see spirits the way I do. My mom said no, but my dad admitted he has experienced some things before. One night while I was sleeping, I caught a quick psychic glimpse of that boy again. Around that time, I felt like I needed to put certain things back where they belonged, like my grandma's cane and an old World War II Japanese rifle sword that may have belonged to my grandfather. After the glimpses I have had in this house, where I live with my parents, I really believe there were people here long before us, maybe even from the 1800s. I also dreamed of that strange mall world again recently. Sometimes, when I close my eyes and try to sleep, I see apparitions, flashes of the past, or hear voices. It feels like I am being shown things I was not supposed to see or hear, especially when my energy is good. What I have started to understand is that I may be shining some kind of light for these spirits. Not just in the house either. I feel like I attract things when I am out in public too. Sometimes it feels like I am a doorway, or a kind of portal. Something even told me once to play with a Ouija board, and I immediately thought, absolutely not. I hear them warn me sometimes. They tell me to watch what I say. One voice said they were trying to make me smart while I was trying to fall asleep. Another time, I heard someone say I was a liar, and then, you complain, you complain, you complain. That one stayed with me. When I was a kid, I think something may have pulled me from my bed. I woke up on the floor. Sometimes it feels like, while I sleep, I am with people I do not know. I wake up feeling dried out and drained, like I need water right away. Lately, I have also been seeing the apparition of an older white woman in a black dress, the kind of dress someone might have worn in the 1800s. She feels grandmotherly, almost like she is watching over me in the house. But not everything I have seen feels gentle. One day this past June, when I was in a really negative state, I saw a black human-shaped figure at my uncle's house. It was halfway out of the ground, with arms and a head, but I could not see any eyes. When I looked straight at it, it disappeared. That same house has had strange energy before. Once, I felt like something followed me there from my grandma's yard. I saw these unnatural three-toed feet, almost like something demonic. Then a woman in a black dress with long black hair appeared in the garage with a childlike figure beside her. She told me to go home. I yelled when I saw her because it scared me so badly. That night, when I was sleeping back at home, I heard her crying voice say, "He hurt her." Another time, I saw a girl with long black hair wearing a white dress or gown appear right in front of my bed. She came out of nowhere, then vanished. I even tried to tell her to come back because part of me felt like I knew who she was. It felt like she was watching over me too. After everything I have experienced, I honestly believe these spirits are working overtime to watch over us. Some of it scares me, some of it confuses me, but some of it feels protective. And I am still trying to understand why I am able to see and hear what I do. So one night, I had this dream, and the second it started, I knew. I knew right away that I was dreaming. I was in a car, driving. Everything felt normal for maybe half a second. Then I looked over to my right, and suddenly the passenger seat started changing. It was like different women I'd known in my life were flashing in and out, one face after another, until it finally settled on my girlfriend, Mira. And the strangest part was, I could feel something scanning my thoughts. Not guessing, not watching, scanning, like it was inside my head, pulling through memories. I looked away because it scared me, and when I glanced back, Mira had this worried look on her face. Then her face started blending into the passenger window, like her skin and the glass became one solid thing. The window began flashing colors: blue, green, white, orange, red. Bright colors, one after another. I remember thinking, what is happening? Then suddenly, the car felt wrong beneath me. The tires started thudding like I was driving over wooden planks. I looked up, and we were going straight off a dock into the bay. The car hit the water, and everything went black. Then I woke up, still inside the dream. There was blood in my mouth, thick and black, and I could hear water pouring in. It sounded like bathwater running somewhere close by. I was groggy, almost like I was waking up from surgery, and I couldn't see anything. Then the cold water hit my legs, and I snapped awake in the dream. That's when I realized we were still in the car, underwater. I looked over at Mira and asked if she was okay. The interior light flickered on, and I saw her tangled in the seatbelt, hanging there wrong, blood running down her face. I panicked and looked down, just saying, "No, no, no," over and over. The light went out. I looked toward the window, and the light came on again. But this time, I saw something outside that still bothers me. The light didn't shine into the darkness. The darkness swallowed it. It was like the beam hit something and got eaten. That was somehow worse than seeing a monster. I looked down, and I just knew. This is a dream. This is one of my worst fears. Something is about to come through that window. I waited for it. I felt it coming, but nothing happened. So I started moving. The car was filling up fast. I untangled Mira in the dark, waited for the pressure to equalize, took one last breath, and tried to open the door. It wouldn't move. I slammed my shoulder into it. I kicked it. Finally, it opened maybe an inch, scraping against rock or concrete outside. I squeezed out with almost no air left and started pulling her after me. And then, out of nowhere, I felt water rush past me into the car, like another door had opened somewhere. Mira was ripped out of my arms so hard the current punched across my face. My eyes were closed the whole time, but I reached for her, and I smashed my face into the roof of the car. I sucked in water and had to fight my way up. When I broke the surface, I realized the water was deep, maybe 20 feet. I looked around and saw backyard lights reflecting across the surface. There were houses, a concrete divider near the road, and then more lights beyond that. I took 3 hard breaths and went back down for her. The car was gone. I swam in circles trying to hit it, trying to find her, but there was nothing. I ran out of air and came back up, farther away now, panicking. Then I thought, the car light. Maybe I can see the car light. So I looked into the water. All I could see were reflections from the houses. Then I noticed one tiny white dot, like a star under the surface. It started getting bigger, then bigger, and I realized it was rushing toward me. I thought, this is it. Here we go. Then this bright, bone-white skeleton shape burst up through the water, almost like something out of Poltergeist, and fell right onto me. That's when I woke up for real. I was next to Mira, and I immediately called my mom. I told her the whole dream because she's always understood strange things like that. She's had her own experiences. Then I told Mira, I'm not going anywhere today. We crashed into water in my dream, and I have a terrible feeling. She didn't laugh at me. She was calm about it. So we stayed inside all day. Around 7 that evening, her mom started getting annoyed because we hadn't left the house. Then she insisted we go out for a ride. And I finally told myself, it was just a dream. I'm being ridiculous. So we went. At first, it was barely raining, just a light drizzle. I said, maybe we should turn around. Mira said, it's not bad. Let's just keep going. Then suddenly the rain came down harder than anything I'd ever driven through. I couldn't see 2 inches in front of the windshield. I said, no, we have to turn around. And as I looked over, I saw it. The same look of concern on Mira's face from the dream. That's when the déjà vu hit me so hard it felt physical. I spotted an exit and took it. The second I did, water rushed up my window so fast I slammed on the brakes. The wipers cleared the glass, but the water was still there, rippling against the window. I looked over at Mira, and behind the little hairs near her neck, I saw green. Then I pulled my focus back and realized there was a line of green water up to her eyes. We were underwater. I tried to reverse. The car died. Mira turned around, saw the water behind us, and screamed. Not a normal scream. It was pure terror. I went straight for the window, and thank God it rolled down. On my side, the water was sitting just under the window line. A police officer appeared up on the main road and started shouting for us to swim toward him. I tried to open the door. It wouldn't open. And then, just like in the dream, I slammed my body into it. It opened maybe an inch and scraped along the street. That déjà vu was crushing me. I got into the water, and it was only waist deep at first, but something in me kept repeating, "Do not swim under this water. Walk. Keep her above it." So that's what I did. The water got up to our necks. I lifted Mira and told her, "If I disappear, don't come back for me. Just keep moving." I held her up the way a waiter carries a tray, and I started walking. Every step got deeper. 4 inches, 6 inches, more. I was fully stretched out, holding her above me, when I took one more step and there was no ground. I threw her forward as far as I could before I dropped. I went under, and for a second, I heard her swimming. Then the sound changed. It went from crashing in my ears to muffled bubbles, then to nothing. I remember thinking, what am I doing? I tried to swim, and I swear, something wrapped around me. It felt like a heavy sheet gripping me from my shoulders to my knees. I couldn't move. I rocked my body, trying to break free, and then a thought entered my mind. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was more like knowledge appearing all at once. It said, "You want me to show you the dream was real?" And I got angry, really angry. I started cursing at it underwater, blowing out my air on purpose, almost out of spite. Every instinct in my body screamed not to do that, but somehow I knew it would let go. Then I hit the ground. It released me. I kicked off the bottom, and I came up from what felt like 20 feet down. Just before I reached the surface, I heard Mira swimming, and I shot toward the sound. I came up right in front of her. She grabbed my neck, and I started moving through that water as hard as I could. I was half running, half swimming, using my arms like paddles. Every time I dipped down, she swung off my back, and I had to catch her again. The physics of it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. We were maybe 15 feet from solid ground. I could see the edge. Just a few more pushes. Then I felt something like a finger press into my back. My vision tilted up toward the sky, and suddenly we shot forward. 15 feet in maybe 1 second. I landed out of the water so hard I thought I broke my wrists. I remember making this awful sound because the pain hit all at once. I told myself, that didn't happen. No way that happened. Then I heard Mira crawling out behind me, and she yelled, "What was that?" And I knew she felt it too. I didn't answer. I just grabbed her, and we climbed up the hill toward the road. When I reached the divider, I turned around. And there it was. The reflection of the backyard lights on the water. The same view from the dream. It was like staring into a mirror from something that had already happened. My brain just shut down. I was weak. I could barely speak. We got into the cop car, and I told Mira to call my mom. She reached into the purse I'd put on her back to keep it dry, pulled out her phone, and it was ruined. Then I pulled my old black phone out of my pocket. It was on. I stared at it like I didn't understand what I was seeing. I put my mouth on the buttons, trying to suck water out, because that phone had been underwater with me for several minutes. But it was cry. My wallet was soaked. My clothes were soaked. Everything was soaked. The phone was dry. That's when I really went quiet. 5 moments from the dream had happened in real life, almost exactly. The look on Mira's face, the water rising to the window, the door opening only an inch, the drop into deep water, the backyard lights reflecting back at me. Later, when we went back after the flooding, I already knew there would be a dock there, even though I'd never been to that spot before. And it was there. I still think about it all the time. I still don't fully know what it was. Maybe something was warning me. Maybe something was testing me. Maybe both. But after that, those sudden thoughts kept happening. Not regular thoughts, more like information being dropped into my mind. Sometimes they saved me from situations I couldn't have seen coming. Eventually, I started saying things out loud before they happened, just to see if I was losing it or if it was real. And more than once, the people with me watched those things happen exactly the way I said they would. So when people talk about dreams, warnings, signs, or that strange feeling of just knowing something, I don't dismiss it, because I know how it happens. I lived it. I've carried this story quietly for years, mostly because every time I've tried to explain it, people either look uncomfortable or try to laugh it off. And honestly, I get it. I probably would have done the same before it happened to me. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I still think about that place more often than I'd like to admit. It started with a small family trip for my dad's birthday. We lived in Northern California at the time, and we decided to spend a few days in a tiny coastal town off Highway 1. The kind of place that looks peaceful in photos. All gray cliffs, salt air, quiet roads, and old wooden houses tucked into the hills. The Airbnb we booked was beautiful, at least from the outside. It was a multi-unit property sitting near the edge of an ocean cliff. When we arrived, it was close to midnight, so everything was dark except for the porch lights and the thin glow coming from the windows. The second I stepped out of the car, something felt wrong. Not dangerous in an obvious way, just wrong. Heavy. Like the air had been holding its breath for a long time. My brother felt it too. He gave me this look, and later he admitted he'd gotten the same strange feeling right away. But it was late, we were tired, and nobody wanted to start the trip by sounding dramatic, so we kept it to ourselves. The next morning, I finally got a good look at the property, and it really was stunning. There were 3 separate units, a big old barn or workshop the owner told us not to enter, and this little hobbit-like structure built into the hillside with a hand-painted sign that said, "Do not enter." There was also a wooden lookout platform near the cliff, with no railing at all. Just a flat stretch of wood and then open air. My brother and I stayed in the smallest unit. My parents and 2 family friends stayed in the largest one. The 3rd unit was empty, and after everything that happened, none of us felt any desire to explore it. The first strange thing happened during the day. My dad and his friends swore they saw someone standing in the window of the barn. The window was high up, near the roofline, and the figure was completely still. At first they thought maybe it was a coat rack, or a tarp, or something hanging inside. But when they walked closer, they realized the barn only seemed to have 1 floor. There was no obvious place where someone could have been standing at that height. They stepped back to look again. The figure was gone. They tried the doors, but everything was locked. No explanation, no sound, nothing. That same afternoon, we went into town, did some hiking, wandered through little shops, and tried to shake off the weirdness. In one shop, I saw a jade bracelet. I don't usually wear jewelry because I'm sensitive to how things feel on my skin, but for some reason, I kept going back to it. It was pale green, almost milky, with 1 large, smooth stone in the center. The woman at the shop told me jade was known as a protection stone. She said it would look after me if I wore it. I know that might sound silly, but in that moment, It comforted me. I bought it, put it on right away, and didn't plan to take it off. That night, we all finally admitted the property felt strange. I told everyone that one of the biggest red flags for me was my dog. He had separation anxiety and normally wouldn't leave my side, but he refused to come into the little unit where my brother and I were sleeping. He would stand outside the door and just watch me. I tried bringing him in a few times, but every single time, he scratched at the door until I let him out. Eventually, I stopped forcing it. I told myself he just wanted to be near everyone else, but deep down, it didn't feel like that. Inside our unit, there was a couch facing the sliding glass doors, and beyond those doors was the dark yard leading toward the cliff. I sat there, crocheting, trying to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me through the glass. At first, I thought it was probably my dog outside, staring in. So my brother and I grabbed flashlights and checked. My dog wasn't there. We called for him, and he came running out of my parents' unit. My mom said he'd been with them for at least 20 minutes. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself it was anxiety, unfamiliar place, big windows, dark ocean, all of that. We locked up and went to bed. The next day was mostly normal. Then night came again. I was on that same couch, crocheting again, and the feeling came back. That awful, crawling sensation of being watched. I kept looking up at the glass, expecting to see a face there, but there was nothing. My brother went to sleep before me, and eventually I was alone downstairs with that feeling sitting on my chest. Around 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I locked every door. I put the extra lock on the sliding glass door, then wedged a broom handle into the track so it physically couldn't open. My bed wasn't in a real bedroom. It was more like an open loft area at the top of the stairs. My brother's room was beside it, with an actual door, but my bed was just there, exposed to the stairwell and the space below. I got under the blankets and tried to distract myself on my phone. Then I heard movement downstairs. Small footsteps. Not heavy adult footsteps. Small, quick steps, almost like a child skipping around the kitchen and living room. I froze. Then I heard metal dragging. It sounded like someone had taken a spoon or a knife and was slowly scraping it along the counters, then tapping it against things. Dragging, tapping, dragging, tapping. I remember lying there, completely stiff, trying to make sense of it. No doors had opened, no locks had turned. Whatever was making that sound hadn't come in. It was already inside. Then my phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. The sound echoed through the whole unit. The footsteps stopped instantly. For 1 second there was silence. Then those tiny footsteps came running up the stairs. I can still hear it when I think about it. Fast, frantic, light footsteps racing straight toward me. I panicked. I grabbed my pillow, threw it over my head, and started whispering, "Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me." I couldn't look. I didn't want to see what was there. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then they came right up beside my bed. And then I felt pressure on the pillow. Not a little pressure. Something was pushing down. I couldn't move. I don't know if I was frozen from fear or if something was actually holding me there, but I felt completely trapped. I kept begging under the pillow, barely breathing, waiting for it to stop. After that, everything went blank. The next thing I remember, it was morning. I woke up shaken, confused, and terrified because I had no memory of how it ended. I ran to my parents' unit and told them what had happened. That's when I found out they'd had their own experience the same night. My dad had moved to the couch because he was snoring and keeping my mom awake. A few hours later, my mom woke up and saw what she thought was my dad standing at the foot of the bed. She asked him what he was doing. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, watching her. After a moment, she realized it wasn't my dad. She screamed, and when my dad came running in, the figure vanished. My dad told her he hadn't been sleeping either. He'd been hearing heavy footsteps moving through their unit all night, sometimes so close it sounded like someone was walking right behind him. Every time he turned around, nothing was there. By then, it was around 4 a.m., so they stayed awake together, watching movies with the lights on, trying to calm down. My brother and the family friends didn't experience anything like we did, but they believed us. They knew we weren't the type to invent something for attention. We were all shaken. Then we noticed the jade bracelet. The stone had changed color. When I bought it, it was a soft, pale green. Now there was a dark green, almost black mark inside the main stone. We tried washing it. We checked it in different lighting. It wasn't dirt, and it wasn't on the surface. It looked like the color had changed from within. I know there are scientific reasons stones can change color. Skin oils, temperature, moisture, all of that. But I had bought it the day before, and the mark never went away. I kept thinking about what the woman in the shop had said. Protection. By the time we left, I had this awful certainty in my body that something terrible had happened on that property. I couldn't prove it. I still can't. But the cliff, the locked barn, the strange empty unit, the figure in the window, the footsteps, the thing at my bed. It all felt connected. And maybe this is where people think I sound unreasonable, but I had this deep feeling that there had been a man there once, and that children had been hurt there. I felt like my parents had seen him, and I had heard one of the children. I don't say that lightly. I know how it sounds. But that place changed something in me. Before that trip, I was skeptical about the paranormal. After that night, I wasn't anymore. I still don't know exactly what happened. I just know I never want to feel that kind of fear again. When I was younger, maybe around 16 or 17, I used to read tarot cards for my friends. Nothing serious, really. I did it for free, mostly because it felt interesting and a little mysterious, and everyone thought it was fun. But sometimes when I did readings by myself at home, I would get this strange feeling. Not exactly like someone was watching me, but like someone was standing nearby, just out of sight. I usually tried to ignore it. One afternoon after school, I came home tired and decided to take a quick nap before practice. I was lying on my side, right near the edge of the bed, and I was just beginning to drift off when I heard a voice inside my head. It said, very clearly, "Don't read tarot." I don't know why, but instead of being afraid right away, I just got irritated. I remember thinking, no, absolutely not, and I told it to leave me alone. Then I opened my eyes. There was something crouched right in front of me, facing me. It had pale, wrinkled skin and a bald head with a few long gray hairs sticking out of it. Its eyes were dark and reddish, and its teeth were yellow, crooked, and rotten looking. It looked sick, old, and inhuman all at once. I still remember its face so clearly, even though I wish I didn't. I don't remember if it spoke again. What I do remember is shutting my eyes because I couldn't handle looking at it. The moment I did, my whole body felt like it was being spun around violently, like I had been thrown into a washing machine. When I opened my eyes again, the thing was gone, but everything looked strange. The room was either bright white or deep red, flashing and shifting. Then suddenly I couldn't see anything at all. It was just darkness. I felt like I was somewhere cold, almost like a cave. I could hear water dripping slowly onto stone, and then I heard a woman screaming. That was the worst part. It wasn't just a scream of fear. It sounded full of pain, like someone was suffering terribly. It was so loud and so awful that I knew I had to wake myself up somehow. I fought to open my eyes, and I don't even know how I managed it, but eventually I did. And then, everything stopped. Later, I showed my husband a picture I had made of the creature. and he said it reminded him of a creature from those fantasy movies. But I hadn't really watched them, so I don't think that image came from there. I still don't know what I saw, but I know how it felt. It felt real, and it terrified me. The second experience shook me even more. At that time, my sleep schedule was completely ruined, so I decided I would stay awake for a full day to reset it. Of course, I failed. Around lunchtime, I got so exhausted that I decided to lie down for just a couple of hours. I was on my stomach, and my cat was beside me. I started drifting off slowly, and then I felt someone hugging me. At first, it felt warm, comforting even, like being wrapped in this soft, heavy embrace. But then I remembered I was home alone. No one should have been there. Around the same time, I heard a voice. It didn't sound male or female, but somehow it felt familiar. It was speaking in a language I didn't know, something strange and flowing. But in that moment, I felt like I understood it anyway. That scared me badly. I started trying to remember any prayer I could, anything at all. And then the voice changed. It turned into a scream. I don't know how to describe it except to say it was the most horrifying sound I have ever heard. It felt like it came from somewhere horrible, somewhere people are not supposed to hear. I managed to force myself up and sit on the bed. My cat was just sitting there, calm, looking at me. And then I blacked out. That part still bothers me because normally I would have run out of the apartment or knocked on a neighbor's door. But I didn't. I just lost consciousness, like every bit of energy had been pulled out of me. After that, I slept with the lights on for a while. I kept thinking I saw shadows moving around the house. Eventually that faded, and I went back to normal, but it took time. There was also one strange thing that happened before all of this. I once visited an old fortune-telling woman, which is fairly common where I'm from, and she told me there was something dark attached to me. Honestly, though, she looked unsettling enough herself that I didn't know whether to believe anything she said. For a long time, I tried not to think about any of it. I just moved on. But I still wonder what was really happening. Was it paranormal? Was it sleep paralysis? Was it my imagination turning against me because I was tired and scared? I've never been diagnosed with any mental or psychological condition, and both experiences happened in the same apartment. When my husband lived there with me, he had very intense sleepwalking episodes too. Sometimes they were so disturbing that I would panic and cry because I didn't know what to do. After we moved out, his sleepwalking stopped. So I guess that's why I still think about it sometimes. Has anything like this ever happened to you? And what do you think it could have been? I want to tell you about one of the darkest and saddest figures in Thai ghost folklore. She is known as Pi Thai Tong Klom, the spirit of a woman who dies while pregnant or while giving birth. And in Thai belief, this is not just any ghost. This is a spirit shaped by grief, fear, love, and unfinished longing all at once. People believe she becomes powerful because her death is sudden and unnatural. She leaves the world before she is ready. She may still be holding on to her child, her home, her husband, her life. And because that love has nowhere to go, it twists into something restless. That is what makes this spirit so frightening. She is not only angry, she is heartbroken. One of the most famous legends connected to this belief is the story of May Nok of Pra Kanong, a young woman who died during childbirth while her husband was away. But even after death, she returned to their home as if nothing had happened. She cooked, cared for the house, and waited for him. At night, people said they heard her singing softly to her baby. The villagers were terrified because they knew the truth. May Nok was gone. Her child was gone too. But her love had stayed behind. There is one scene from the legend that people still remember. A lime rolls away and falls beneath the house. Instead of walking down to pick it up, May Nok stretches her arm impossibly far, reaching down from above to retrieve it. That is when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. She is no longer human. People also say her spirit caused fear around Wat Mahabut, where monks tried to calm her restless soul. Some versions of the story say she appeared in impossible places, even hanging upside down from the beams of a sacred hall. It is a strange and chilling image, but beneath it is something deeply painful. May Nok was not simply haunting people for the sake of terror. She was refusing to let go. And maybe that is why this kind of ghost has stayed in Thai memory for so long. The fear comes from the supernatural, yes. But the sadness comes from something very human. A mother separated from her child. A wife separated from her husband. A life cut short before its love could be completed. Similar beliefs appear in other parts of Southeast Asia and even in Chinese traditions, where people speak of the danger of one body, two spirits. The idea is that when two lives are lost together, the sorrow becomes heavier and the spirit becomes stronger. So when people speak of Pi Tai Tung Klum, they are not only speaking of a ghost. They are speaking of grief that never found peace. This happened around 2007 or 2008, when I was still a kid. Before I get into it, I should give a little bit of background, because the place itself matters. The farm is in Zululand, South Africa, and it had been in my family since the early 1970s when my grandparents bought it. That whole area is heavy with history. Within roughly 150 kilometers of the farm, there are battlefields and monuments everywhere, going back to conflicts between the Zulu, the Boers, and the British. Some of those battles happened in the 1800s, some much later. It is the kind of land where you can almost feel that people lived, fought, died, and left pieces of themselves behind. When my grandparents bought the farm, they were told a few unsettling things about it. Apparently, sometime in the 1930s, a housekeeper had been murdered there. They were also told that a previous owner had taken his own life in the main bedroom of the farmhouse. And there was one strange thing about that room that never really went away. A patch on the ceiling would always stain this yellowish-orange color. Everyone assumed it was water damage, but no matter how many times it was painted over, no matter if the boards were replaced, the stain would come back within days. There were also old traditional Zulu graves on the farm grounds, and as far as I know, they had never been disturbed. Now, this particular story happened inside the house, around the dining area and the corridor. My grandparents had gone into town that day, so my younger brother and I, we were about 6 and 8 at the time, were left at the farm with the housekeepers and cattle workers. I should say, they were like family to us. There was never any fear that we would be hurt or treated badly. We grew up around them. At some point, the workers went off for lunch, so my brother and I were alone in the yard. We were playing with BB guns, shooting at little targets we had set up. Then my grandparents came back from town. We ran over to help carry the groceries into the house, like we always did. We would bring everything into the kitchen and help my grandmother pack things away. The first time we walked through the dining area, past the bookshelf, everything looked normal. Nothing was out of place. But the second time we passed that same bookshelf, carrying groceries, every single book had been thrown out. They were all over the floor. Some were scattered across the dining table. It looked like someone had grabbed armfuls of them and just tossed them everywhere. My grandmother immediately blamed us. And honestly, I cannot really blame her. We were young, full of energy, and always getting into something. Plus, everyone else was outside having lunch, so, in her mind, who else could it have been? We said sorry, even though we knew we had not done it. We helped fix the bookshelf, put everything back, and then went outside again. After that, my brother and I went down to my grandfather's workshop. We started messing around with some tools and old motor parts he had lying around. Nothing serious, just kids being kids. About 45 minutes later, my grandmother and both of the housekeepers came running down from the house. They were scared. Not annoyed, not pretending, but genuinely frightened. They begged my grandfather to come inside and get the blue man out of the house. That was how they described him. The blue man. My grandfather went straight up to the house while my grandmother and the two women stayed with us. A few minutes later, he came back out furious. He started arguing with them in Afrikaans and Zulu, telling them he did not have time for games. But they insisted there had been a man inside the house. They said he was throwing furniture around, smashing dishes, and shouting that everyone had to get off his property. But when my grandfather went in, the house was perfect. Nothing broken, nothing moved, no dishes smashed, no furniture overturned. Everything was exactly where it should have been. That night, nobody wanted to split up, so we all slept in the main bedroom. My grandfather kept his weapon close, just in case there really was someone on the property trying to scare us or break in. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, we woke up to my grandmother screaming. She was in the corridor, just across from the dining room. My brother and I ran behind my grandfather, and that was when we saw him. A man. He ran into the spare bedroom, which was the room my brother and I used whenever we stayed there during school holidays. My grandfather charged after him, shouting at him to get out of the house. For context, my grandfather Peter was not a small or nervous man. He was a military veteran, about 6'4", broad, heavy-set, and back then, he did not take nonsense from anyone. If there had been a real person in that room, I honestly believe my grandfather would have dragged him out himself. But that is not what happened. He ran into the room. Then he screamed. And then he came walking back out backwards, slowly, without turning away from whatever he had seen. For years, he would not tell us what happened in that room. It was only much later, when I took over managing the farm, that he finally told me. He said the man had moved into the corner of the room, the corner closest to our beds. Then, with his back pressed against the wall, his body began twisting into shapes that no person should be able to make. My grandfather said it was not like someone bending or stretching. It was wrong. After that, the man rose upward against the wall, still staring at him the entire time. And my grandfather said the eyes were the worst part. He said they were not really eyes at all. They looked like two pitch-black holes where eyes should have been. The clothes the man wore looked old too. Not just worn out, but old-fashioned, like something elderly men would have worn when my grandfather himself was a child. We never found any confirmed death on the farm that matched that man. We could not connect him to the housekeeper who had been murdered or to the previous owner who died in the main bedroom. After that night, everything went quiet for a very long time. Years, actually. The next thing I personally experienced there did not happen until early 2014, and that is a much longer story. But the older I get, and the more I think back on that farm, the more certain I am of one thing. That place is deeply, deeply haunted. I've been meaning to tell this story for years because it still sits in the back of my mind, like one of those memories you can't quite explain. This happened when I was a kid, around the time I still believed in Santa Claus. I was young enough to want to believe with my whole heart, even though by then, I was starting to hear other kids say Santa wasn't real. At that age, I had this big fascination with Eastern European culture, especially Russian culture. I don't even know exactly where it started. Maybe it was movies, maybe video games, maybe just the sound of the language itself. But something about the music, the writing, the history, and the way Russian sounded really caught my attention. So for months before Christmas, I had been trying to teach myself little bits of Russian. I was learning the alphabet, practicing phrases, and copying words down in a notebook. Nothing too advanced, obviously. I was still a kid. But I was really proud of it. And because I still believed Santa traveled all over the world, I thought, well, he must know every language, right? He visits kids in every country. He has to know about every place, every culture, every kind of family. So on Christmas Eve, I decided to write Santa a thank you note in Russian. It wasn't anything complicated, just a short little message saying thank you for the gifts, thank you for bringing happiness every year, and that I hoped he had a good night. I folded it up, wrote "For Santa" on the outside, and left it under the Christmas tree. I didn't think much of it after that. To me, it was just a sweet thing to do. The next morning, it was Christmas Day. My younger brothers and I rushed downstairs like we always did, excited to see what Santa had left. The tree looked beautiful. There were presents everywhere, and my parents were sitting there smiling while we tore into the wrapping paper. It was a normal Christmas morning. Warm, loud, messy, and happy. After we finished opening everything, we started cleaning up the crumpled wrapping paper from the floor. That's when I noticed my folded note still sitting under the tree. I picked it up and opened it. And there was writing on it. Someone had written back to me in Russian. The handwriting was neat, not childish, not rushed. It looked like an adult had written it. The message said, "Ho ho ho, большое спасибо," which means, "Ho ho ho, thank you very much." I remember getting this huge burst of excitement in my chest. I ran over to my family and said something like, "Look, Santa wrote back." At that moment, I really believed it. I thought, that's it. Santa has to be real. He answered me in Russian. But as I got older, that memory started to feel stranger and stranger. Not too long after that Christmas, my parents eventually admitted that Santa wasn't real. They told me they had been the ones buying the gifts, eating the cookies, drinking the milk, and setting everything up. So I asked them about the note. I said, "Then who wrote the message back to me?" And they looked genuinely confused. They told me they had no idea. The thing is, when I had shown them the note that Christmas morning, they didn't even know what language it was. I remember them pausing and asking, "What is that?" And I told them it was Russian. My family is Hispanic, and at that time my parents barely knew English, let alone Russian. They didn't know anything about Russian culture, and honestly, they weren't interested in it. Their only real idea of Russia came from old Cold War-era fears and things they had heard growing up. So the idea that either of them somehow wrote a clean Russian response in neat handwriting just does not make sense. My little brothers couldn't have done it either. One of them was still a toddler, and the other was a young kid with no phone, no real internet access, and definitely no reason or ability to write in Russian. Years later, I asked them too, and they both said they had no clue what I was talking about. There was nobody else in the house that night. We didn't live near close relatives or friends who could have come over and done it. And even if someone had somehow helped, I still don't understand how they would have known what I wrote, or that they needed to answer in Russian. That note was just under the tree, and by morning, it had a reply. I'm an adult now, and I know how Christmas works. I know the gifts were from my parents. I know the cookies and milk were part of the tradition. But that one thing has never made sense to me. Someone, or something, wrote back. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to know who it was. When I was a teenager, my mom and I had to leave Montana and move back closer to our family. It happened fast. She had separated from my stepdad for personal reasons, and there really wasn't enough time for her to find us a proper place to stay. Thankfully, my dad let her take the camper so we'd have somewhere to sleep. We packed that thing as full as we could, and he told us that once we got settled somewhere, he'd bring the rest of our stuff. At first, my mom found a little RV spot back home while she looked for a house and tried to get work lined up. But that fell through. So her brother, Uncle Darren, told her we could park the camper beside his house while she got back on her feet. His sister, my Aunt Marla, was staying there too with her kids because their house had flooded. So for a while, it was my mom, me, my aunt, and my cousins all there together. Uncle Darren wasn't around much because he drove trucks for work and was gone constantly. My mom and I were technically outside in the camper though, and honestly, I think that might have been the only reason I lasted there as long as I did. Little by little, I started hearing stories about the house. It was a one-story place, but it had a basement with 2 rooms downstairs. My cousins used to sleep down there, but my aunt had moved them back upstairs. I never got the full reason why, but I could tell nobody liked talking about it too much. Aunt Marla told me strange things happened in that house. Her phone assistant would activate by itself at odd hours and say things that didn't make sense. She tried to laugh it off, saying her phone hated her, but she didn't look like she thought it was funny. Her husband had nightmares about a woman standing over the bed, just staring down at them. My cousins had their own stories too. Eventually, Aunt Marla and the kids moved back home after their house was fixed. After that, it was just me and my mom there. And that's when things really started happening to me. At first, it was small enough that I could explain it away, or at least I tried to. Sometimes I'd nap on the couch inside the house, and when I woke up, something would be sitting near me that hadn't been there before. One time, I woke up with a black hat lying right on my chest. I didn't own a black hat. I didn't remember seeing it anywhere before I fell asleep. Still, I told myself maybe I missed it somehow. Maybe someone had left it there. Maybe. My mom also started hearing tapping on the outside of the camper at night, and sometimes she heard noises coming from the woodshed behind us. That woodshed matters. I didn't know how much at the time, but I would. The part that bothered me most was the bathroom inside the house. I hated it. I know that sounds dramatic, but I mean it. I hated being in there. Our camper didn't have water hookups, so if I needed to shower or use the bathroom, I had to go inside. Every time I stepped into that room, I felt like something was wrong. Not I'm scared of the dark wrong. More like the air itself was waiting for me to notice it. I used to beg my mom to sit outside the bathroom while I showered. Sometimes I even asked her to sit in there, just so I wouldn't be alone. She always said no. So I brought the cat. I'm not proud of that, but at the time, it made sense to me. I thought if the cat was in there, at least I wasn't by myself. And if something happened, maybe the cat would react first. But every single time, except once, the cat disappeared from the bathroom. I don't mean it slipped behind something. I mean I would lock the door, get in the shower, and when I got out, the cat would be gone. Then I'd open the door and find it sitting outside in the hallway. That door clicked shut properly. It wasn't loose. There weren't holes or gaps anywhere big enough for a cat to crawl through. And I always locked it before I got in the shower. So for the cat to get out, the door would have had to unlock, open, let the cat out, close again, and lock behind it. After it happened for the 4th time, I refused to use that bathroom anymore. I refused to go inside the house unless I absolutely had to. I made such a big deal out of it that my mom finally let me shower at the community center instead. The last thing that happened there was the worst. My mom had finally found us a house, and we were packing up the camper to leave. We were making sure nothing would slide around while she drove, and she handed me a plastic-wrapped case of water bottles. She told me to put it inside the house because she didn't want to take it with us. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since the bathroom incidents. I didn't want to go in then either. So I opened the front door, leaned in, set the water down just inside, and slid it to the side. I never fully entered the house. When I looked up to close the door, the bathroom light turned on. At first, I tried to make sense of it. I thought maybe the switch had been halfway down and finally clicked on by itself. Then I heard things being thrown. I couldn't see directly into the bathroom from where I was, but I heard stuff hitting the floor. Things from the counter, maybe bottles or small objects. Then it sounded like someone, or something, was throwing itself around in there. I froze. And then came the scream. I don't know how to describe it in a way that does it justice. It didn't sound human. It was low and high at the same time, loud enough that my whole body locked up. It was pure panic poured into a sound. I slammed the door shut and ran to my mom, crying and yelling that someone was inside the house. My mom didn't ask questions. She told me to get in the truck. Then she yelled for me to get in and leave it alone. As we were pulling away, she looked shaken. Then she told me she had seen Uncle Darren's wife standing in the woodshed. His wife, my aunt, had died by suicide in that woodshed years before. I knew she had passed away, but I didn't know how. I didn't know where. My mom said she saw her waving, almost like she was saying goodbye. I told her what had happened in the bathroom, and after that, we both went quiet for the rest of the drive to our new house. Later, my mom called Uncle Darren and told him what happened. That house still hasn't been sold, as far as I know. And when I looked into the property later, I found out there had been multiple fires there over the years, rebuilds, and more than one suicide connected to the place. I don't know exactly what was in that house, but I know what I heard. And I know that whatever was there waited until the very end to make sure I'd never forget it. I've been noticing something lately in so many people around me, in family, in coworkers, in friends. There's this quiet anxiety running underneath everything. This need to control every detail. This fear of failing. This fear of not being good enough. This feeling that if they loosen their grip even a little, everything might fall apart. And the hardest part is, many people think this is just normal. They think life is supposed to feel heavy. They think being tense all the time means they are being responsible. They think worry is part of being human. But recently, someone I know had an experience that reminded me that it doesn't have to be this way. I'll call her Mina. That's not her real name. She came to me because she was struggling with sleep and anxiety. Her mind was always racing. Her body never really relaxed. Even when nothing was happening, she felt like something was about to go wrong. During the soul journey session I guided her through, her higher self showed her many lifetimes, almost like scenes projected across a huge screen. She was standing there, watching them unfold. Different lives, different problems, different heartbreaks, different fears. And after the session, she said something that stayed with me. She said, "It felt like a video game. You enter the game and forget it's a game. Everything feels so serious. The struggles feel real. The fear feels real. You get completely absorbed in it. But you can also wake up while you're still playing. You can remember that it's only a game, and suddenly, everything becomes lighter. You know you'll get through it. You know it's temporary. You know you're safe." That was the shift. When she saw all those lives from a place of peace, she wasn't trapped inside the drama anymore. She could step back. She could see the patterns. She could understand that the point was not to suffer forever. The point was to grow, to heal, to become resilient, to learn how to let go. Her higher self told her, "Release the fear of failure. Trust the path. Things will unfold the way they are meant to." And when we worked with the fear she had been carrying in her chest, she said it felt like a heavy stone had finally been lifted. Her breathing changed. Her shoulders softened. Her whole body seemed lighter. And honestly, I see this so often. People forget that they are playing the game. They believe the anxiety is the truth. They believe control is the only way to stay safe. They believe the constant worrying is just how life works. But it isn't. It's what happens when we become too lost in the game. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Sometimes we come here to experience being lost. Sometimes we come here to feel the pressure, the uncertainty, the challenge. But we didn't come here to be crushed by it. We came here to experience. We came here to play. The lesson is this: you are not meant to carry all of that weight forever. The anxiety, the control, the fear of failure. So much of it comes from forgetting who you really are. You are not only the character on the screen. The character has problems. The character has deadlines, relationships, bills, fears, memories, plans, and things they're trying to hold together. But the deeper you, the real you, is the one watching. And when you remember that, even for a moment, life becomes less suffocating. The story is still happening, yes. The challenges may still be there, but they don't own you in the same way. So if this speaks to you, try this meditation. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed for about 10 minutes. Sit comfortably, either on a chair or on a cushion. Keep your back straight, but let your body feel natural, not stiff. Close your eyes. Take 3 slow breaths. Inhale through your nose. Exhale gently through your mouth. Let your body settle. Now imagine that you are sitting in a dark movie theater. In front of you is a large blank screen. Slowly, your life begins to appear on that screen. You see your responsibilities, your worries, the situations you keep trying to control, the conversations that replay in your mind, the things that make your chest tighten. Just watch it all like a film. Notice the version of you inside the movie. See how that character reacts. See them worrying, planning, trying to protect themselves, trying to keep everything from falling apart. Don't judge them. Just watch. Now gently shift your attention to where you are sitting. Feel the seat beneath you. Feel the air around you. Feel your breath moving in and out. And notice this: you are not the character on the screen. The character may be afraid, but you, sitting here in the theater, are safe. There is no danger in this seat. There is only awareness. Now imagine that behind your seat there is a door. Stand up, turn around, and open it. Step through. On the other side is a peaceful place made just for you. Maybe it is a quiet beach at sunrise. Maybe it is a forest clearing. Maybe it is a mountain path under a wide sky. Let it appear in whatever way feels natural. This is the place of the player, the one who holds the controller, the one who chose this level, the one who existed before the story began. In this place, feel how light your body becomes. No worries can reach you here. No fear needs to follow you here. This is the part of you that was never broken, never trapped, never truly in danger. Now look back through the doorway. You can still see the theater. You can still see the screen. The film is still playing. But now you remember. It is a film. It is a game. It is an experience. Stay in this peaceful place for a few minutes. Breathe there. Rest there. Let your nervous system remember what safety feels like. And know that you can return to this place anytime. When you're ready, take one deep breath. Slowly open your eyes. Move your fingers and toes. Drink a little water if you can. Try doing this meditation before sleep each night for 2 weeks. At first, it may feel unusual. Your mind might resist it. That's okay. After a few days, you may notice that anxiety doesn't grip you quite as tightly. After 2 weeks, you might catch yourself smiling at something that used to make you panic. Not because the game disappeared, but because you remembered who you are. You are the player, not only the character, and the player doesn't really lose the game. The player experiences it. I hope this helps. Take care. About a week ago, I shared something about what I thought might be a mimic in my house, or maybe something attached to the land itself. Well, last night, it came back. And this time, it moved through the house like it wanted me to know it had heard me talking about it. It was 3:17 in the morning when I woke up to this scratching sound. Not loud exactly, but sharp enough to pull me straight out of sleep. A second later, I heard what sounded like my little girl's bedroom door opening, then closing. The problem was, my daughter wasn't home that night. She was staying elsewhere, so there was no reason for that door to move. I lay there for a few seconds, just listening. At first, I tried to convince myself it was one of the cats messing around in the hallway. They do that sometimes. But when I slowly lifted the blanket and looked around, every single cat was either stretched across me or curled up against my husband. The dog was on the floor, wide awake, staring at the open bedroom door. And the house was quiet. Too quiet. This place is never completely silent. There's always something. A pipe ticking, the fridge humming, the roof settling, an animal shifting around. But right then, it felt like the whole house was holding its breath with me. Then I heard it. 2 slow footsteps in the hallway. But they didn't sound like normal footsteps. They sounded dry and rough, almost like sandpaper dragging against painted walls. I stayed perfectly still and kept my eyes locked on the doorway. Then came 2 more steps. And then something flew into the room. It was one of my daughter's stuffed toys. It came from her bedroom and landed right near the dog. My dog panicked and jumped onto the bed, which scared the cats and nearly knocked the breath out of me. And I remember thinking, very clearly, that I had just watched a stuffed animal fly into my bedroom by itself. All the animals went completely still after that. Every one of them was staring at the same spot, the top left corner of my bedroom doorway. So I looked, and that's when I saw it. There was this black shape peering down from near the ceiling, the same dark mass that used to bother me years ago when my daughter was a baby. It wasn't standing there like a person. It was more like it was hanging or leaning from above, watching us from the corner where the wall met the ceiling. I went cold all over. For a few seconds, I honestly couldn't tell if I was awake or trapped in sleep paralysis. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only stare back at it. Then my dog, who is a cane corso and pit mix, launched off the bed and jumped at it, snapping into the air like he was trying to bite whatever that thing was. And the black mass just vanished. Not moved. Not backed away. It evaporated. The second I heard my dog hit the floor, I knew I was awake. I had been awake the whole time. After that, something started running across the metal roof. Something heavy. It sounded like a large animal with 4 legs sprinting back and forth above the house. It kept going until about 3:50, and then everything stopped all at once. The next morning, I kept thinking about the work I'd been doing near the tree line. I'd been clearing out invasive vines and brush from the edge of the property, and now I can't stop wondering if I disturbed something out there. Like I pulled on the wrong route or crossed some boundary I didn't know existed. I don't think this is a mimic anymore. I don't know what it is. I have told it to leave. I have cleansed the house with frankincense, myrrh, yerba santa, benzoin, and sage. I've had ordained ministers pray over the home and bless it. But I don't feel like this thing responds to that kind of authority. Honestly, religious prayers don't seem to weaken it. If anything, they make it more active. That's what scares me. It feels completely inhuman, older than anything I know how to name. And it doesn't just make noise. When my husband is away for work, it touches me at night. It has sat on the bed beside me. It has played with my hair. It has thrown pots and pans from the dish rack and knocked things off the stove. I wake up feeling drained, like something has pulled the life out of me while I slept. When I'm home, I get headaches and nausea. But when I leave the property, I start feeling normal again. The previous owner died here more than 20 years ago, though I haven't been able to find out how. I also learned that my property used to be part of a much larger plantation before the land was divided up. So trying to trace what may have happened on these 4 acres feels almost impossible. I'm working on getting cameras set up because I need proof. My family has experienced this too, but for some reason, I seem to get the most attention from it. And moving is not an option. So I'm asking plainly now, what do you think this thing is? And how do I make it stop? I want to tell you about something that happened to my sister-in-law, and honestly, even now, thinking about it gives me that cold little pinch at the back of my neck. At the time, my brother, his wife, and their 3-year-old son were looking for a place to live. Money was tight, the economy wasn't great, and then they found this big old house with rent so low it almost felt like a mistake. You know that kind of price where you feel lucky for about 5 seconds, and then some quieter part of your brain starts whispering, "Why is it so cheap?" The house looks strange from the outside. Not falling apart strange exactly, more like awkward. There was this narrow staircase on the right side of the front entrance, leading up to a front door that sat higher than ground level. It gave the whole place an odd, lifted feeling, as though the house didn't quite want to touch the earth. But nothing was officially wrong with it. The agent never mentioned any unnatural death there, and on paper, it seemed fine. So they moved in. My brother, his wife Lena, and their little boy Noah. Now, Noah was usually the kind of kid who loved exploring a new place. Open a cupboard, peek behind curtains, run from room to room like he'd discovered a private kingdom. But in that house, he changed almost immediately. He didn't want to explore. He didn't want to be alone. He clung to Lena constantly. If she stepped out of his sight for even a few seconds, he would panic and cry. Not a normal whiny cry either. It was fear. Real fear. At first, Lena thought maybe he just needed time to adjust. New house, new room, different sounds, that sort of thing. Then one day, she was walking through the house, with Noah right behind her as usual. As she passed one of the bedrooms, she saw something out of the corner of her eye. A large chandelier hanging from the ceiling. She stopped and turned to look properly. There was no chandelier, just a plain light bulb. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe her eyes had played a trick on her. Maybe the light shifted. Maybe she was tired. But after that, the house began to feel different, especially the kitchen. Whenever Lena was in there, she had this powerful feeling that someone was watching her. Not a vague feeling, not imagination. It was so strong that some days she would grab Noah, leave the house, and sit in the car for a while. Other times, she would take him to the mall, just so they didn't have to stay inside. Then came the night with the bedroom light. Lena was getting ready to go out with some friends. She was sitting in the bedroom, doing her makeup. The light switch was one of those old-fashioned round knobs, the kind you twist to adjust the brightness. Turn it one way and the room gets brighter. Turn it all the way back and the light shuts off. As she was putting on makeup, she noticed the room getting dimmer. At first, she thought, old house, old wiring, nothing too unusual. But then the light went completely off. She went over to the switch and saw that the knob had been turned all the way to the off position. That was when she started feeling uneasy. Still, she turned it back on. all the way up, brightest setting. She sat down again, and slowly, the light began to dim, dimmer, dimmer, then off. This time, she was looking toward the switch, and she saw the knob turn by itself. Slowly, all the way back to off. And then, in the corner of her vision, she saw a black shape sitting on a stool in the bathroom. It looked like a man. Not a clear man, not a person with features. More like a shadow wearing the idea of a body. She didn't wait around to make sense of it. She got out of that house. Now, my brother believed in ghosts, which somehow makes what he did next even more ridiculous, because when Lena told him everything, he basically did nothing. Truly heroic stuff. Husband of the haunted year. But that changed one night when he came home late from work. Lena was asleep in their bedroom. The bathroom door inside the bedroom had been left open. At some point, she woke up to a strange sound. Tap, tap, tap. Like a cane hitting the floor. She opened her eyes. In the darkness, she saw the same black figure slowly moving toward the bed. She knew she was awake. She was completely sure of it. This wasn't a dream dissolving at the edges. This was happening. Lena grew up Catholic, so she pulled the blanket over herself from head to toe and started praying. She began with, "Our Father." And right beside her left ear, she heard a deep man's voice. It repeated the words after her, mocking her, softly teasing, "Our Father," then giggling. She kept praying. She was terrified, but she kept going, while that voice stayed right beside her head, repeating, laughing, breathing close enough that it felt almost physical. Then the bedroom light switched on. My brother had just come home. After that, they moved out. And from what I heard, nobody ever stayed in that house for more than 6 months. Later, Noah said something I still don't like thinking about. He told us he had seen 16 faces in that house. When we asked him what he meant, he just started crying and said he didn't want to talk about it. 2 years later, he didn't remember any of it. The house was eventually torn down. I still wonder about that sometimes. If something really was there, where did it go when the walls came down? Did it leave? Did it follow someone? Did it simply wait, with nowhere to sit and nowhere to haunt? The rumor was that the previous owner had been an old man who lived alone and died naturally in the house. And one more thing still bothers me. If that thing mocked Lena while she prayed, then what does that mean? Did the prayer protect her? Or did it only make him laugh? Today something happened that honestly shook me. My husband, my father-in-law, and I were driving back from a little day trip. And on the way home, we were planning to stop by the hospital to visit my mother-in-law. She's been staying there for treatment. We ended up getting back much earlier than we thought we would, so we considered going home first, resting for a bit, and then heading to the hospital later. But I had this really strong feeling that we should just go straight there. I can't fully explain it. It wasn't dramatic or anything, just this deep inner push, like, no, we need to go now. So we went. When we pulled into the hospital parking area, my husband was looking for a spot, and suddenly he glanced up toward the building. His whole face changed. I was sitting in the back seat, and I could see that he looked unsettled. Then he said, "That woman in the window looks exactly like your mom." So I looked up, and I froze. There was a woman standing at a 4th-floor hospital window, looking straight down at us. And I mean straight at us. Not casually looking outside, not just staring into space. She was watching us, and she looked exactly like my mother. The strange part is, to me, she looked like my mom from maybe 10 or 12 years ago, but to my husband, she looked like my mom now. Either way, It was close enough that my whole body reacted before my brain could even catch up. It made absolutely no sense. My mother is in the United States. We were in Portugal. She has mobility issues and definitely could not just hop on an international flight and appear in a hospital window overseas. Rationally, I knew it could not be her. But visually, emotionally, instinctively, it felt like her. After we parked and got out, we had to walk a few minutes from the car to the hospital entrance. And that entire time, this woman kept watching us from the window. I kept looking back up because I couldn't help myself. Every time I did, she was still there. I had chills everywhere. I kept telling my husband, "This is really freaking me out." And what made it even stranger was that she didn't just look like my mom. Her posture, the way she held herself, the way she stared, even the stillness of her face, it all felt painfully familiar. My husband noticed it too. We both agreed that her mannerisms were almost identical. Once we got upstairs to my mother-in-law's room, I tried to settle myself, but I could not stop thinking about it. It kept replaying in my mind. That window, her face, the way she watched us walk in. Eventually, I told my husband, "I need to go to that floor. I need to walk past that room and see her closer up." He said he would come with me. So we went to the 4th floor and found the area where her room should have been. But right above that section of the unit, there was this huge sign hanging from the ceiling that said, "Authorized personnel only." We couldn't go in. It felt like we were being blocked from getting any closer, which only made the whole thing feel even more unreal. I should probably add that I've been going through a very deep spiritual awakening lately. My view of reality has been changing a lot, and I've been opening up to ideas I never would have taken seriously before. One of those ideas is that this life might be some kind of Earth School simulation, a place where we come to learn, evolve, and remember who we really are. So part of me wonders if my higher self created that moment somehow. Maybe it was a confirmation. Maybe it was meant to show me that what I've been feeling and learning is real. That reality is far more layered than we usually allow ourselves to believe. But another part of me wonders if it was something else entirely. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe I saw another version of my mother living a completely different life. Maybe somehow she recognized us too, and that's why she was staring so intensely. I don't know. And the wildest part is that the night before this happened, I saw what I believe was a UAP for the first time in my life. So having these two experiences back to back has left me feeling completely stunned. I keep trying to make sense of it. My logical mind still wants to doubt it a little and say, maybe I imagined the resemblance. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe my brain filled in the blanks. But deep down, I know what I saw. I saw a woman in that window who looked like my mother, moved like my mother, and watched us like she knew us. And I honestly don't know what to do with that. I still get uneasy when I think about this, even though it happened years ago, and I've mostly moved on from it. It's strange how something can be so far in the past and still feel close enough to breathe on the back of your neck. I was around 14 when it started. I'm 24 now, so a lot of time has passed, but back then, it felt like my whole world had quietly tilted sideways. One afternoon, I went with my cousins to visit an old royal estate outside our town. It was huge. The kind of place that looks beautiful in daylight, but probably shouldn't be explored after sunset. There were wide courtyards, cracked stone paths, faded walls, and gardens that looked like they were holding on to secrets. We were just being kids, running around, laughing too loudly, chasing each other through the passageways. To get from one part of the palace grounds to another, we had to cross this garden area where old graves were lined up. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was young, distracted, and honestly not very careful. Then one of my cousins, Karan, shoved me as a joke. I stumbled, tried to catch myself, and my foot landed directly on one of the graves. At first, I just stepped away and kept walking. I didn't say anything. Nobody did. It didn't feel important in that moment. But after that day, things slowly began to change. It started small. Little sounds at night. Footsteps outside my room. The floor creaking when everyone else was asleep. Nothing dramatic enough to make people believe me, but just enough to make me feel like I wasn't alone. Then it got worse. I started waking up around midnight almost every night. Not from a dream, not from a noise, just suddenly wide awake. I would lie there in the dark, trying to force myself back to sleep, but I couldn't. And then I'd hear it. Footsteps. Clear, slow footsteps circling my room. They would move around me, stop near my bed, then start again. Sometimes they came so close that I could feel this heavy presence beside me, like someone was standing there, leaning over me, watching. And whenever I sat up, everything stopped. The room would go silent. But the moment I lay back down, the footsteps would rush away, almost like whatever it was didn't want to be seen. After a while, I started noticing other things too. I had a small pendant I used to wear, and it kept breaking. I would get it fixed, wear it again, and somehow it would break again. I couldn't focus in school because I was exhausted all the time. I was sleepy during the day, nervous at night, and constantly on edge. Then I began seeing shadows. Not full figures at first, just movement in the corner of my eye. A shape passing behind a doorway. Something dark standing near a wall, gone the second I looked directly at it. The worst part was the feeling. That feeling of being watched. I tried telling my family, but most of them thought I was making excuses because I didn't want to study. I don't blame them completely. I know how it sounded, but I wasn't pretending. Sometimes I could feel something so close to me that it almost felt like someone was breathing near my face. Eventually, I told my mother and grandmother everything. I even told them about stepping on the grave at the palace. That was when they finally got quiet. My grandmother took it seriously right away. She said some things should never be laughed off, especially when old places and graves are involved. So they took me to a priest. He listened carefully and said that sometimes spirits can feel disrespected by careless actions. He also said something that stayed with me. He told us that if the spirit had truly wanted to harm me, it probably would have done so already. He believed it wasn't trying to destroy me. It was trying to make itself known. Maybe it wanted acknowledgement. Maybe it wanted closure. He prayed for me and gave me a protective necklace to wear. I thought that would make everything better, but somehow it made things clearer. After I started wearing the necklace, I began seeing the figure more often. A dark, shadowy shape. It never stood right in front of me. It stayed at the edges of my sight, near corners, doorways, and dim places. I would turn my head and it would be gone, but I always knew it had been there. Then, one evening, everything changed. There was a big festival happening in our area. My grandmother always used to say that spirits don't like bright, happy energy. They avoid celebrations, prayers, music, lights, all of it. I never knew whether I believed that, but that night made me wonder. I was home alone, sitting in my room, trying to relax. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a peaceful way. Then I looked toward the main room and saw it. A figure sitting on the sofa. Just sitting there. Dark, still, and shaped almost like a person. For a few seconds I couldn't move. My body went cold. Then somehow I gathered enough courage to stand up and walk toward it. The moment I stepped closer, it vanished. But then I saw it again, moving fast toward the front door. I don't know what came over me, but I ran after it. I reached the door, opened it, and saw the shadow rushing down the stairs. And then it disappeared. Just like that. After that night, the footsteps stopped. The broken pendant stopped. The shadows stopped. I could sleep again. Everything became normal. I don't know exactly what followed me home from that palace. I don't know if it was angry, confused, or just waiting for me to understand what I had done. But I know what I felt, and I know how badly it affected me at the time. It might not sound like the most terrifying story in the world, but living through it was different. It scared me deeply. And in a strange way, it also taught me something. Fear becomes heavier when you keep running from it. That night, when I finally walked toward the thing I had been avoiding, it left. Maybe that was all it wanted. Maybe it just wanted me to face it. There are a few parts to this story, so stay with me. Back in 2020, I was in this season where I was really trying to heal. I was practicing mindfulness every day, meditating, doing breath work, spending a lot of time outside, just trying to come back to myself in some way. One afternoon, I was sitting on my back porch in the sunlight, just being quiet, when I noticed a dragonfly nearby. Now, I'm a pretty skeptical person by nature. My brain usually wants evidence before it believes anything. But for some reason, in that moment, I thought, what would happen if I stopped being so closed off for a minute? What if I just allowed myself to be open? So I closed my eyes, took a few slow breaths, and pictured the dragonfly landing on my knee. And then it did. I opened my eyes, and there it was, sitting right on my knee. So then I thought, okay, what if I imagine it landing on my finger? And it did. At that point, I was already stunned. Then I pictured it landing on my foot, and it went there too. Then back to my knee, and again, it followed. It happened too many times for me to brush it off as coincidence. I remember sitting there thinking, something strange is happening right now. I didn't know what to call it. Spiritual, paranormal, intuitive, whatever word fits, but I knew it felt real. Fast forward to September of 2023. My grandmother was at home on hospice. A couple of days before she passed, she was in this half-asleep, half-unreachable state. One night, while she was resting, I sat beside her and held her hand. I closed my eyes and quietly hoped for something. A message, a feeling, a connection, anything. I think part of me believed that because she was so close to passing, maybe there would be some kind of opening, some little doorway between here and wherever we go. But nothing happened. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then, about a month ago, I stayed up late talking with my cousin Mara, who I don't speak with very often. She asked me if anything unusual had happened in the house since my grandmother died. Anything paranormal, any signs, any strange little moments. I told her no, and honestly, I admitted I was disappointed. When I was little, I used to ask my grandmother to visit me after she passed. I wanted so badly to believe she would. Mara said something that stayed with me. She said maybe time doesn't work the same way on the other side. Maybe we have no idea how or when they're able to send a message, and maybe sometimes we're not in the right state to receive it yet. That really stuck with me. The past few weeks, I've been back in another healing season. I've been trying to climb out of depression, anxiety, insomnia, all of it. I started meditating again. I had Reiki done for the first time. I made some big decisions that felt scary but necessary. The kind of choices that clear space in your life even if they hurt at first. Then, 2 nights ago, I was listening to music on my laptop, which I almost never do. A song came up that I hadn't heard in a long time, 4th of July by Sufjan Stevens. The song is written like a conversation between someone who has died and someone who is still alive. I started really listening, then reading the lyrics as they played. And then I got to the line, "Do you find it all right, my dragonfly?" The second I read the words, "my dragonfly," something in me broke open. It wasn't gentle, it was instant. It felt like every emotion in my body rushed to the surface at once. I started crying so hard I almost felt sick. In that moment, my mind connected the dragonfly from 2020 to my grandmother. Maybe it was her. Maybe she sent it. Maybe it was some kind of sign before I even understood what it meant. And then the next lines felt like they were being spoken directly to me. Why do you cry? Make the most of your life, while it is rife, while it is light. That hit me so deeply because I haven't been in a good place for a long time. I felt like I wasted parts of my life, especially the last years of my 20s. I've carried so much grief and regret, and suddenly it felt like she was telling me, "Live. Please live." After that, I went to get a framed photo of my grandmother so I could put it on my bedside table. But I got sidetracked and opened her jewelry box. The first thing I pulled out was a charm bracelet. On it was an engraving from my grandfather that said, "To our eternal love." I know logically that it was from him to her. But in that moment, it felt like she was speaking through it too. Like love doesn't end. Like it just changes form. And maybe this sounds strange, I know it might, but I keep thinking about what Mara said, that time could be different on the other side, that we don't know how messages move, that maybe we have to be ready to receive them. And I wonder if that night, when I held my grandmother's hand while she was close to death, somehow created a bridge. Maybe not in a way I can explain. Maybe that quiet moment connected back to the day with the dragonfly. Maybe what I thought was nothing wasn't nothing at all. My logical brain keeps arguing with the part of me that believes. It says, it's just a song, it's just lyrics. Lots of people feel things when they hear that song. And I get that. But the dragonfly really happened. I didn't imagine that part. It moved to every place I pictured before it even left the last one. It went on too long to feel random. I've had other moments in my life too, where I just knew something before it happened. A calm would come over me, then the thing would unfold. Sometimes I feel deeply tuned in to nature, almost like there's a quiet language there that I can almost understand. I don't know exactly what this was, but I know how it felt. And it felt like love finding a way through. This happened to me when I was about 13, back when we lived in this old house in a tiny mountain village. It was just my mom, my little brother, and me. We lived on the upper floor, and the owner of the house lived downstairs. Our apartment had a really strange layout. There was this long hallway, and at the end of it was the kitchen. Then, to get to my room, you had to walk through the kitchen. And to get to my mom's room, you had to walk through my room first. So her bedroom was kind of tucked away at the very end of everything. And honestly, I never liked that room. I can't explain it properly, even now. Nothing obvious ever happened at first. But every time I had to go near it, I felt uncomfortable. Heavy, almost. Like the air changed a little. I used to keep her bedroom door shut whenever I could, because I hated seeing inside. We also had a cat, and he was always wandering around the apartment or going outside. So strange little noises weren't unusual. One summer afternoon, I was sitting in my bedroom by the open window. There was a wide windowsill, and I used to sit there all the time to get some fresh air and talk to people outside. My mom was down in the courtyard watching my little brother play near the garage. The door to my mom's room was closed, like usual. It had one of those old, round doorknobs, the kind you see on older doors. I was just sitting there, relaxed, looking outside and chatting a little, when suddenly I heard this loud rattling sound behind me. I turned around, and my whole body froze. The doorknob to my mom's bedroom was shaking. Not turning exactly, just shaking hard, like someone on the other side had grabbed it and was trying to open the door. At first, I tried to stay calm. I thought maybe I'd accidentally shut the cat in there. That made sense for about 2 seconds. Then I looked back out the window, and I saw our cat outside, near the garage, walking close to my little brother. That's when my heart just dropped, because everyone who lived in that apartment was outside. My mom was outside, my brother was outside, the cat was outside, and I was the only one upstairs. But that doorknob was still moving. I didn't even think. I just ran. I bolted out of my room, through the kitchen, down the stairs, and into the courtyard, crying and shaking. I told my mom what had happened, probably barely making sense because I was so scared. My mom has always been very practical, so she stayed calm. She told me there was probably nothing there, and she went upstairs to check, mostly to reassure me. She opened the door. There was nothing in the room. No person, no animal, nothing fallen against the door, nothing that could have moved the handle like that. And I know people can say maybe I imagined it, or maybe it was the wind, or an old house making old house noises. But I know what I saw. That handle was being shaken from the other side. Other strange things happened in that apartment after that too, but that moment stayed with me the most. Even now, years later, when I think about that bedroom at the end of the apartment, I still feel that same little wave of fear come back. Like some part of me is still sitting on that windowsill, hearing the doorknob rattle behind me. Hey, so I wanted to share something that happened during a long weekend trip near Lake Leelanau, because honestly, I'm still trying to understand it. I went there with my partner, Milo, and it was my first time in the area. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. We rented this quiet little one-level place up on a hill, just above North Lake Leelanau Drive. No basement, no attic, nothing that made the place seem unusual at first. It was close enough to the road that we could see it, but during the whole stay, I barely heard any traffic. Maybe a few cars total. The property felt private, secluded, but not unsafe. At least, not at first. When we walked in, the first thing I noticed was how still it was. Not peaceful exactly, more like emptied out. The air felt too quiet. I remember feeling a little off balance, almost foggy, but I told myself it was probably just the drive. That first evening, we heard a few small sounds inside the unit. Little knocks here and there, maybe something shifting. Nothing dramatic enough to make us pack up or start investigating. At the time, it felt random. But the first night, after Milo fell asleep, things changed. I started hearing movement inside the rental. Not outside. Inside. Objects shifting. Bare feet brushing across the floor. It sounded like someone was moving around casually, especially in the kitchen. Like the place was being used by someone who already knew where everything was. And when the sound stopped, that was worse. It felt like someone was standing in the hallway, watching us. Then it felt like they were in the bedroom. Sometimes I had this awful sense that they were moving between the hall and the bathroom, just pacing around us while Milo slept beside me. I was uncomfortable in a way I can't really dress up. I felt genuinely scared. The next morning, while I was showering, I heard the shuffling again. Clear, barefooted steps. Before we left for breakfast, I checked the windows and doors. The windows were fine, but one of the exit doors was unlocked. I asked Milo right away, "Did you use this door?" They said no, and I knew I had locked it the night before. When we came back, we spent the afternoon and evening in the rental, trying to relax. But the noises continued through the day. Little movements, shuffling. The sense of someone nearby. I kept checking the rooms, the windows, the hallway. I did it enough that Milo noticed and asked me about it. I just felt like I needed to stay alert. Before bed that second night, I checked everything again. The doors, the windows, anything we had opened. Everything was locked. Then Milo fell asleep, and almost immediately, it started again. This time the activity felt stronger, louder, more deliberate. I heard movement in the common areas, but I also felt like someone was walking through the bedroom and stopping near us. At one point, I heard what sounded like two voices having a low conversation. I couldn't make out words, but the rhythm was unmistakable. Two people murmuring somewhere inside the place. I finally got so scared that I turned on lights. I went into the bathroom, switched on the light, partly closed the door, and got back into bed. I turned my phone brightness up, put on a video at low volume, and tried to fall asleep. I had nightmares all night. The next morning, I woke up and found a heavy drawer wide open in the bathroom area. It was granite and hardwood, not some lightweight drawer that could slide open on its own. Milo and I had even talked earlier about how awkward and heavy those drawers were, because the knobs were tiny and smooth. That drawer had not been opened the night before. I know it wasn't, because it would have blocked the way out of the bathroom. Then, while I showered again, I heard the bare feet. But this time, there was another sound too. Heavier footsteps. Slower, more solid, going back and forth. The thing that made my stomach turn was that those heavier steps reminded me of Milo's walk. We had actually joked about that kind of footstep the day before, but I knew it wasn't Milo. The rental had an open layout, and I knew where they were. By then, I felt like something was mimicking us, or playing with us. From that point on, the activity seemed almost constant. Later that day, we went out for a while, came back briefly, and something unexpected happened. I proposed to Milo inside the rental. I know that probably sounds strange after everything I've said, but whenever we left the house, I felt normal again. The fear lifted. The confusion lifted. So when we came back for just a few minutes between outings, I wasn't thinking about the house. I was thinking about us. But when I walked toward the bedroom to get the rings, I suddenly felt deeply disoriented, almost confused. It wasn't nerves. We had been talking about marriage for years. This was not a rushed or uncertain thing. Milo said yes, and for a few moments, I was happy. Then I felt violently ill. Not just nervous or emotional. Sick in that awful way where you wish your body would just get it over with so you could feel relief. We tried to blame it on food, even though we had eaten the same meal. I took medication, but nothing really helped. That sick feeling stayed with me for the rest of the day. That evening, when we got back, I finally told Milo plainly that something felt wrong in the rental. That was when they admitted they had heard things too. Someone going through cabinets. Someone moving through our belongings. Muffled conversations. I hadn't heard the belongings being touched, but they had. After that, we were both on edge. We tried to enjoy the evening, especially because we had just gotten engaged, but we kept looking over our shoulders. Down the hall, toward the windows, toward the doors. At one point, we were sitting together, talking about the engagement, trying to feel grateful and excited. And then came the loudest sound of the entire trip. It came from the middle of the unit, It was so sudden and violent that the only way I can describe it is that it sounded like an explosion inside the house. Milo snapped toward the sound and yelled, "There is literally no reason for that." And they were right. There was no reason. No explanation. Nothing had fallen. Nothing made sense. We didn't even really discuss it afterward, because I think neither of us wanted to make it more real than it already was. On the final night, I went around again before bed to lock up and prepare for leaving in the morning. Several windows that we had never used were unlocked. The doors were unlocked too. Then I noticed the dining chairs. They had been pulled farther out from the table than when we arrived. We had never used the dining set. The fear came early that night. I took my medication earlier than usual, left more lights on, and luckily I didn't have to lie awake alone for long after Milo fell asleep. Still, there were noises. The same presence. The same feeling that the place was occupied by something that knew we were there. The final morning was a repeat. Bare feet. Heavy feet. The feeling of being watched. And one exit door open again. As we left the property, I said, "We are never coming back here." Milo agreed. But here's the part that still bothers me. Later, Milo didn't remember the loud, explosive sound clearly. They didn't remember yelling what they yelled afterward. They also downplayed a lot of what happened, even though they had admitted to hearing cabinets, belongings, and muffled voices while we were there. They mostly remembered that I had made it very clear I did not like that house. And the thing is, I'm not someone who scares easily. I grew up in what I'd call a loud house, spiritually speaking. By the time I was 12, I was used to strange sounds and odd feelings. I've been around places and people with heavy energy before. I've had experiences that might unsettle other people, but they never made me feel like this. This was different. I don't know if it was me. I don't know if it was the house. I don't know if it was the land. But I know I did not feel safe there. I didn't feel well. And at certain points, I honestly didn't feel fully sane. So I'm sharing this because I'd really like to know whether anyone familiar with Leland or Lake Leelanau has heard similar stories. Folklore, local history, anything tied to that area. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to understand why that place felt so wrong. I must have been about 15 when this happened. Back when I was living in this little hometown where everybody sort of knew everybody. It had maybe 12,000 people in it, give or take, so news traveled fast, rumors traveled faster, and creepy houses had reputations before you ever stepped inside them. My cousin, who I'll call Brandon, lived close by, and we used to hang around with these kids down the street. There were two sisters, Marissa and Kayla, and their little brother, though, honestly, we mostly spent time with the girls because they were closer to our age. Their house always had this uneasy feeling to it. It was older, kind of worn down, and I remember people saying it had been a drug house before their family moved in. I don't know how true that was, but in a town like that, stories stuck to places like dust. And the girls had mentioned more than once that they thought the house was haunted. One afternoon, Brandon and I were outside when Kayla and Marissa came running over. Kayla, the younger sister, looked genuinely shaken. Not just, "I want attention" scared, but pale, wide-eyed, trying to talk too fast because her brain was still back in whatever had happened. She told us she'd woken up in the middle of the night. She slept on the bottom bunk, and Marissa slept above her. When Kayla opened her eyes, she said there was a hockey stick floating near her head. Not lying on the bed, not leaning against something. Floating. She said the handle was angled downward and the blade was pointing up, almost like someone was holding it there, ready to swing it. She tried calling Marissa's name, but Marissa wouldn't wake up. So Kayla screamed, and the stick dropped to the floor. After that, she refused to sleep alone in that bunk and ended up squeezing into bed with her sisters. Now, I'll be honest, Brandon and I didn't know whether we believed her. We were teenagers, so part of us wanted to laugh it off, and part of us desperately wanted it to be real. That perfect, spooky little doorway between skepticism and curiosity. So I asked her, "Do you want to show us what happened?" She said yes. And because this was around 2007, when YouTube was still this strange new kingdom of grainy chaos, I ran back and grabbed my family's old camcorder. Brandon and I were joking that if we caught a ghost, we'd be famous. Real professional ghost hunters, obviously. 2 kids, 1 busted camcorder, no plan. We went into their house and headed upstairs to the girls' bedroom. As soon as we got in there, I started recording. I asked Kayla to explain it again, and she picked up the hockey stick to show us exactly where it had been. She stood beside the bottom bunk and held it off to the side near where her head would have been, with the blade tilted upward. We suggested maybe Marissa had held it from the top bunk while she was asleep or half awake. Marissa immediately shook her head and said no. And to be fair, she was known for sleeping like a stone dropped into a lake. Once she was out, she was gone. Then I asked Kayla, "Where was the stick before you saw it?" She grabbed it and slid it under the top bunk mattress, right above where she would have been sleeping. Basically, it had been tucked between the mattress and the bed frame, underneath Marissa. At that point, I started thinking, okay, maybe she woke up confused. Maybe in the dark, half asleep, she saw part of the stick sticking out and thought it was floating. It seemed possible. Kayla got irritated with us and said, "But it fell. I heard it hit the floor." And she had a point. That part didn't fit as neatly. Then Brandon and I noticed this little storage door in the back corner of the room, near the entrance. It was one of those small, awkward doors that already look suspicious just because of where it is. We started joking that the storage room was probably the haunted part. I walked over, opened the little door, and stuck the camcorder into the dark, like some kind of bargain bin paranormal investigator. You couldn't see much. It was just blackness and dust and old house silence. We made some dumb comment about how maybe that was where people had hidden drugs, or maybe someone had overdosed in there years ago. Then I walked back over to the bunk bed and lay down on the bottom bunk with the camcorder still in my hand. We all kept talking for a minute. Nothing dramatic, just that nervous, joking chatter people do when they're trying not to admit they're uncomfortable. Then I looked up at the top bunk. The hockey stick wasn't there anymore. I said, "Wait, where did we put the stick? I thought it was still under the mattress." Everyone stopped. We all looked around the room. Nobody saw it at first. Then someone pointed toward the little storage door. Next to that door, there was a dresser pushed up against the wall. And there, somehow, was the hockey stick wedged behind it. The blade was facing up and sticking out toward the little door, like it had been carefully tucked there. The room went cold in that way that has nothing to do with temperature, because it didn't make sense. If someone had put it there, they would have had to pull it out from under the top bunk mattress, carry it across the room, and shove it behind the dresser. And the way it was positioned was weird. It wasn't just lying there naturally. It was tucked between the dresser and the wall with the hook side out, leaning toward the storage door. So I grabbed the camcorder and rewound the tape. We watched it back right there in the room. There was Kayla talking about the stick. There she was, sliding it under the mattress. Then, just a few seconds later, the video showed me turning toward the little storage door. And as the camera swept past the dresser, you could see it. The hockey stick was already there, wedged behind the dresser, blade up, clear as anything. Nobody said much at first. We just stared at that tiny camcorder screen, trying to make our brains turn the impossible into something ordinary. Brandon finally said something like, "Nope, maybe I moved it and it fell behind there." But even he didn't sound convinced. I told him there was no time. The camera moved toward that corner too fast. Someone would have had to pull the stick out from under the mattress, cross the room, place it behind the dresser, and get out of the shot without making any sound. And that space behind the dresser was so tight that if it had fallen in, it absolutely would have clattered. It didn't. Nobody heard anything, and the video showed it there almost immediately. That was enough for all of us. We suddenly remembered we were still standing in the bedroom where this had just happened, and we ran downstairs and straight out of the house. I never uploaded the video, partly because the camcorder was already old and annoying to deal with, even back then, but mostly because I didn't want my awkward teenage self floating around online forever, attached to some shaky ghost footage. I still think about it though. I can't fully explain it. I've tried. I've gone over the timing, the room, the way the stick was positioned, the sound it should have made, everything. After that day, I hated going upstairs in that house. I could do it, but I never liked it. And those girls were terrified of sleeping in that room again. Honestly, I don't blame them. So, when we first moved into that house, I was still a teenager, and almost right away, strange things started happening. At first, it was knocking from the attic. And I don't mean little scratching sounds or something you could easily explain away as an animal moving around. These were actual knocks. Clear, deliberate knocks. One night, I was sleeping beside my mom, and she woke me up and asked, "Do you hear that?" And right above us, from the attic, there were several knocks in a row. I remember hearing them, but honestly, I was so exhausted that I barely reacted. I just wanted to sleep. Another time, during the day, my little brother and I were lying on my mom's bed, staring up at the ceiling. And from the exact spot I happened to be looking at, there was a knock. He was still pretty young then, so I told him it was just the wind. I didn't want to scare him, but I knew it didn't sound like wind. There were other sounds too. A few times, we heard what sounded like a ball bouncing. It would usually start above us and then move away, like someone was bouncing it across the floor overhead. That always stuck with me because my mom had heard that same kind of sound before, years earlier, in another house we lived in. She was alone in a room, and she heard a ball bouncing in there with her. Eventually, the attic knocks stopped, but other things started happening instead. About once a year, my mom would be away for a week or so, and for some reason, things always seemed to get worse when I was alone in the house. One of the first times she left, on the very first night, I heard 4 loud bangs from the attic. They were strong enough that I woke up, but again, I was so tired that I just fell back asleep. Another year, she was away again, and the first morning I woke up because someone, or something, was knocking hard on my bedroom wall. It was so loud that the mirror hanging on that wall actually shook. I got out of bed because I had friends coming over later and needed to clean up. While I was moving around, I suddenly heard what sounded like a plastic cup tipping over in the hallway. That's the best way I can describe it. A hollow little clatter, like a cup falling onto the floor. But when I checked, there was nothing there. Another morning, I woke up, got ready for work, and then I heard a click, followed by the sound of an old machine turning on. I looked around and realized it was my PlayStation. Someone, or something, had pressed the power button and it was switching itself on. Then there was another time when I was leaving for work. My mom and brother were both away, so I knew nobody else should have been moving around. As I passed my brother's room, I heard the door handle moving. I saw it from the corner of my eye, going up and down. but the second I turned my head and looked directly at it, it stopped. One night, I woke up because my feet were bouncing. Not twitching. Bouncing. It felt like someone was underneath my bed, pushing up on the mattress from below. There's no real space under that bed for anyone to hide, but I still checked. Then I checked the front door too, just to make sure it was locked. It was. But the scariest thing happened one night when I went to bed around 2 in the morning. Before going to sleep, I had checked on everyone in the house. They were all asleep. My bedroom door was slightly open. It opens into a hallway, and that hallway has another door leading into the rest of the house. We usually kept that hallway door closed because the house got cold easily. There was also a staircase nearby that led up to the attic. The hallway light was on, and I always hear when someone enters that hallway. Always. Especially if my bedroom door is open. But that night, I didn't hear anyone come in. All of a sudden, I heard someone rummaging through the closet right beside my door. It sounded like they were moving through the shoes, shuffling them around, searching for something. At first, my sleepy brain tried to make it normal. I thought, maybe it's the landlord. But then I thought, why would the landlord be inside the house at 2 in the morning, going through our shoes? Then the sound stopped, and right after that, this small standing shelf we had in the hallway started shaking. It wasn't a little wobble. It shook back and forth like someone had grabbed it with both hands and was forcing it to move. I remember thinking, that had better be the biggest rat in the world. And then I got up and slept in my mom's bed, because absolutely not. The strange thing is, I never really felt like whatever was there was angry. It felt more annoyed than anything. I know this sounds strange, but when I think about it, I always picture the color red. I don't know why. It's just there in my mind. Red. It felt like it was trying to get my attention. The last 2 things I remember happening in the house were years ago. One night, I woke up because there were 3 loud knocks on my bedroom door. Again, I would have heard someone enter the hallway, but I hadn't heard a thing. Another time, the door itself shook. And honestly, I think whatever is in that house might even affect my car. But only when I drive away from that house. I don't really know how to explain it properly, but it has something to do with the tachometer, or the engine revving. Basically, the car doesn't do what it's supposed to do whenever I leave my mom's house. Only there. When I stayed at my dad's place, it never happened. When I rented a place for 9 months, it didn't happen once. The car worked perfectly. But now I'm staying at my mom's house again while she's away for the summer. And I've only been here a few days, and it's already started again. The car refuses to rev properly, and I have to stop somewhere, turn it off, and turn it back on again. It's not the way I park. It's not the way I reverse out. I do the same thing everywhere else. A few years ago, I even replaced the part that was supposed to be responsible for it. And for a while, that seemed to fix it. But then, after a few months, the problem came back. Only at that house. So I don't know what it is, but whatever lives there, or whatever is attached to that place, it really feels like it knows when someone is paying attention. I'm still honestly shaken up talking about this, but I think I need to start from the beginning so it makes sense. Almost 3 years ago, my husband and I moved to a small island in the Pacific for his work. We knew it was temporary because his job moves us around pretty often, but the housing they placed us in was old. I mean, really old. The unit was built sometime around the 1940s or 1950s. Before we moved in, I had seen people in local groups talk about these houses being haunted. There were stories everywhere. Strange sounds, weird feelings, people seeing things. But at the time, we didn't take it too seriously. We figured every old military-style house probably had stories attached to it. And since we were only going to be here for a few years, we weren't too worried. About 6 months after moving in, something happened that I still think about. That night, we had already put our little one to bed. Usually, bedtime was around 7:30 or 8, and after that, my husband and I would sit in the living room, watch a show, play a game, or just talk until around 10 or 11. We were on the couch that night, talking about whatever series we were watching at the time, when suddenly we heard this loud stomping sound right outside our child's bedroom. And then there was laughter. It sounded like a child laughing, but not exactly. That's the part that made my skin prickle. It started off deeper than a child's laugh should be, and then it sort of shifted into something higher, like the laugh of a young kid, maybe around 5 or 6 years old. It didn't sound natural. It sounded like something trying to copy a child. I jumped up right away and went to check on our little one, thinking maybe they had woken up or made some noise in their sleep. But they were completely knocked out. Not stirring, not moving, nothing. My husband heard it too, but he tried to explain it away. He said maybe one of the toys had gone off. I remember looking at him like, what toy stomps? Still, I didn't argue. I just felt this heavy, uneasy feeling settle in my stomach. The next day, I went through our child's entire room. I checked every toy, every stuffed animal, every little thing that made noise. Nothing fit. There was no TV in there, no tablet, no sound machine, nothing except the ceiling fan we used for background noise. I told my husband, and he said I was probably overthinking it, so I let it go. Or at least, I tried to. About a year later, our child started saying they didn't want to sleep alone anymore. At first, I thought it was just a normal kid phase. Nightmares, monsters, shadows in the room, all of that. They would say there were monsters, and I would reassure them the way parents do. I told them they were safe. I told them nothing could hurt them. I told them that even if a monster tried, it would have to get through me and their dad first. After a while, they seemed less afraid, and I thought maybe we had gotten through that stage. Then one morning at breakfast, completely out of nowhere, they said something that made me freeze. They said, "The monsters are just friends. They won't hurt us because they're always with us." I tried to stay calm, but I asked what they meant, and they said, "They're with us when we're all home together. They watch us while we sleep so we're safe." I looked over at my husband, hoping he would react, but he just shrugged it off like it was imagination. And honestly, I wanted to believe that too. At least our child wasn't scared anymore, right? That's what I told myself. But then this past weekend happened. My husband got called into work around 9 at night, and our child was already asleep. I stayed up for a while finishing a painting I had started earlier that day. Sometime later, our little one woke up and wanted to sleep in my bed. I didn't mind. My husband wouldn't be home until morning anyway, so we got settled in my room. They curled up beside me and fell asleep pretty quickly. Then, at around 11:30, I woke up to laughter. It was coming from their bedroom. At first, it sounded like hysterical child laughter. Not a soft giggle, not a toy sound, but loud, wild laughing. Then it changed into what sounded like a child talking, except the words weren't words. It was gibberish, but fast, like someone whispering and babbling at the same time. My child sat straight up next to me and said, "Mama, who is that?" And that's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. There were no TVs on, no toys that could make that sound, no tablets, no game consoles, nothing. The only device on was my phone, and it was in my hand. I didn't know what else to do. I got up, walked to my bedroom door, locked it, and came back to bed. I just sat there for a while, completely stunned, trying to make sure my child felt safe enough to fall asleep again. The thing is, this house has always felt wrong. I've had people come over and ask if I've ever experienced anything strange here before I even tell them anything. It's like the air changes when you walk inside. No matter what room you're in, you feel watched. Not always threatened exactly, but never alone. I've tried telling whatever this is to leave. I've tried ignoring it. I've tried pretending it's nothing. But it keeps coming back in little ways, and now it feels like it's focused around my child's room. I've thought about asking the housing office to move us, but I'm scared to tell them the real reason. I don't want anyone looking at me like I'm unstable or making things up. We're supposed to leave the island in about a year, so part of me wonders if I should just wait it out. But another part of me feels like one more year in this house is too long. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if anyone else has dealt with something like this, but I would really appreciate any advice.